Ever see someone take over a room with words alone? The audiobook, Words Are Power, How to Be Articulate shows you exactly how you can cultivate this elusive skill. You'll learn the 9 powerful ingredients of articulate communication that set effective speakers apart from the rest. Get these principles down and you'll change how others see you, react to your ideas and appreciate your contributions. Without them, your great ideas stay locked in your head, your impact minimal, and opportunities slipping away. With down-to-earth exercises and tested techniques, this book will take your communication from just adequate to truly powerful. As we proceed, I encourage you to download the complimentary executive summary of this book, which includes the highlights and takeaway of every chapter. Research indicates that exposure to material in different formats greatly improves learning and retention. Click the first link in the description to request your free executive summary and squeeze every bit of learning from it. It's free for the time being, but it won't be for long, so get it while it's available. Chapter 1, Unlock Your Voice. She was at the podium, credentials perfect, knowledge profound, slides neatly organized. And as she began to speak, something was off. Her words stumbled over one another, consonants dissipated. And her light bulb moments got lost amidst a murk of unclear articulation. The audience struggled to keep up, their minds drifting despite their best efforts. By the time she was finished, her message, perhaps revolutionary, had vanished into thin air, leaving nothing but frustration and lost potential behind. This is a moment played out day by day across boardrooms, classrooms, and conference rooms everywhere. Brilliant ideas perish on unclear lips. Worthwhile insights disappear from view. Moments of connection, influence and growth are lost. Not because the ideas are lacking, but because the voice is unclear. Your voice is your main tool through which your thoughts reach the world. It is the bridge between your inner world and outer world. When that bridge is strong and well built, your thoughts move freely, making their full effect. When it's shaky and unfinished, even your deepest thoughts might never really arrive at their destination. The force of clear speech goes far beyond pronunciation or vocabulary. It is the very foundation upon which all effective communication is based. Without articulation, even the best selected words and well-constructed arguments become powerless. The most powerful stories fail. The most convincing pitches don't sell. Articulation, fundamentally, is concerned with the physical distinctness of speech sounds. It's the accuracy with which your lips, tongue, teeth, and palate collaborate to create individual sounds that come together to form recognizable words. This physical element of speech is usually ignored for the sake of content and style of delivery. But it's the foundational layer, without which the others are ineffectual. Think about how saying, "I want to discuss our objectives" with firm, distinct consonants and sharp vowels, as opposed to mumbling something sounding more like, "I want to top out our goals," with the same content, makes the world of difference. The first gathers attention and respect. The second solicits dismissal or misinterpretation. This isn't a point of aesthetics alone. It is functional. Accurate articulation avoids misunderstanding and vagueness. It gets your message delivered as intended without the listener making mental connections and filling in what they imagine was there but weren't. When you speak clearly, you remove a great obstacle between your mind and your listener's comprehension. In addition, articulation is important in how people view you. Correctly or incorrectly, humans form quick opinions about others based on the way they talk. Clear, concise speech tends to be linked with intelligence, competence, and reliability. Slurred, unclear speech can imply carelessness, uncertainty, or even ignorance, independent of the content of your words. Think about a job interview in which 2 applicants share the same credentials. One communicates with precision and clarity, one mumbles and swallows off word endings. Who is likely to make a good impression? Who appears better prepared, more confident, more competent? The answer is clear. This feeling carries over into everyday interactions as well. The articulate person in a meeting is going to be more likely to get their ideas followed through. The articulate instructor's lectures are going to be recalled. The articulate salesperson will be more likely to seal the deal. The articulate leader is going to be more likely to motivate. The basis of that power rests upon a straightforward truth. Articulation is the cornerstone of being understood. And being understood is the primary goal of all communication. When your speech sounds are clear and crisp, your message is open to your listeners. They don't have to spend mental energy interpreting your words. Rather, they can devote themselves completely to understanding and interacting with your ideas. This ease of processing provides a smoother route for your message to take from your head to theirs. This ease of access directly contributes to listener engagement. As long as individuals are able to quickly comprehend your words, they're more likely to remain engaged with your message. Contrarily, muddled speech makes listeners exert more effort simply to keep up, usually resulting in mental exhaustion and disengagement. Even the most passionate audience is going to find it hard to focus when comprehending your words means exerting effort continuously. Aside from understanding and engagement, good articulation fosters trust and credibility. Listeners naturally link articulate speech with knowledge and proficiency. When you talk clearly, you convey that you've thought carefully about your words and that you value your listeners enough to speak clearly with them. That impression of proficiency provides a sense of trustworthiness that helps overall credibility. This link between articulation and perceived trust is not anecdotal. It mirrors a common awareness in communication literature that vocal presentation has a profound impact on first impressions. The clarity of your speech contributes to how others perceive your confidence, intelligence, and reliability, often within seconds of hearing you speak. These impressions form rapidly and can be difficult to change once established. A strong first impression created through clear articulation opens doors. A poor one closes them before you've had a chance to fully present your case. This reality underscores the importance of developing articulate speech as a fundamental professional and personal skill. Surprisingly, perhaps, attention to clear articulation can also be a way to break through communication apprehension. The fear many have of speaking, particularly in public or high-stakes situations. This fear, more commonly referred to as stage fright or social communication apprehension, plagues countless individuals in all walks of life. When you're thinking mainly about your own nervousness, your attention is inward instead of outward to your audience and message. This self-preoccupation tends to lead to a downward spiral. Anxiety causes bad delivery, which makes you more anxious, which further worsens delivery. Focusing on the outside goal of clarity can interrupt this cycle. By focusing on the physicality of articulation, the exact movements of your articulators, the clear creation of each sound, you shift your attention outward. This functional focus provides your mind with something tangible to work on instead of ruminating on anxiety. As you gain more control over your articulation, you will probably feel more confident in your ability to speak. This confidence arises from the knowledge that you can get yourself understood, which is the very reason for speaking. When you believe in your capacity to communicate effectively, the fear of speaking tends to disappear automatically. This interdependence between articulation and confidence forms a positive feedback loop. More articulation creates more confidence, which in turn enhances your delivery, which creates even more confidence. Through repetition, this process can change your entire communication experience from one of fear to one of empowerment. Our path to well-articulated speech that we're about to take together is both practical and transformative. As you work through this book, you'll acquire a complete skill set that will enhance every area of your communication. We'll look at not only the mechanics of clear speech, but also the strategic aspects that make communication really work. You'll see how to mold sounds exactly, how to control your voice through strategic volume, pitch, rate, and pausing. You'll find out how to organize your thoughts clearly and connect with your listeners from beginning to end. You'll become a master of understanding your audience and adapting your message to appeal to their needs and points of view. We'll also explore how to defend your ideas effectively, communicate with clarity and concision, and build authentic connections through your words. Each chapter builds on the previous one, forming a complete toolkit for effective communication. This is done intentionally in a practical and step-by-step manner. Instead of providing generic tips and theoretical explanations, we'll concentrate on specific methods and practices that you can apply right away. Every concept will be described simply and followed by particular steps you might take in order to gain that skill. The payoff from this journey goes far beyond speaking skills. The more articulate you become, the more you'll probably find improvements in several aspects of your life. Relationships tend to grow deeper when communication improves and gets clearer. Misconceptions lessen and bonds become stronger through the strength of being actually heard. Professionally, effective communication often goes hand in hand with progress and power. Individuals who are able to communicate clearly and convincingly have a tendency to advance within companies. They're likely to get their ideas accepted, their leadership noticed, and their worth valued. Effective communication leads to opportunities that may otherwise be closed off. Maybe most importantly, working on articulate speech usually boosts self-confidence. There's deep satisfaction in realizing that you can communicate well and your ideas and thoughts can have their full effect. This can spread to other situations and affect many aspects of your self-image and response to challenges. Let's start implementing these principles with some building blocks of exercises that will get you underway to better speech. The first step in improving articulation is becoming aware of your current patterns. Most of us have never truly heard ourselves speak as others hear us. Recording yourself gives you that outside point of view. Record yourself speaking in a quiet area for 2 minutes. You can read out of a book, describe your day, or discuss something you know well. The topic is less important than getting your natural way of speaking down. Listen back and pay particular attention to clarity. Can you make out each word separately? Are there sounds that seem to evaporate or merge into each other? Do you detect any habits of vague speech like dropping word endings or mumbling particular sounds? Take observations about what you see without criticism. It is information gathering, not judgment. Pay special care to consonants, particularly at the ends of words since these are usually the first victims of unclear speech. Words such as and, just, about, and going often have their last consonants dropped in informal speech and become on, just, abo, and goin. Also listen to your vowel sounds. Are they distinct and crisp? Or do they get muffled into the schwa sound, the sound in about? Individual vowels play an important role in general clarity and expressiveness. This self-evaluation gives you a starting point and indicates where you most need to work. You may be surprised by what you hear. Most individuals are not conscious of their speech habits until they listen to a recording. Now that we have established this awareness, our second exercise emphasizes enhancing the dexterity of your articulators, the oral structures that form speech sounds. Tongue twisters are ideal for this exercise because they involve accurate and fast movements of lips, tongue, and jaw. Choose 2 or 3 tongue twisters for practice every day, emphasizing correct enunciation over speed. These are a few classics to begin with. She sells seashells by the seashore. Red leather, yellow leather. Special New York. The 6th sick shakes, 6th sheep sick. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Start slowly, making each sound with exaggerated clarity. Slowly increase your speed without losing clarity. If you trip or the sounds get fuzzy, slow down and rebuild. This exercise conditions your speech muscles to move more accurately and establishes the physical coordination required for clear articulation. With time, these enhanced movement patterns will be carried over into your normal speech. Our third building block exercise creates awareness and control of individual speech sounds. Take a simple sentence. For instance, the rapid brown fox bounds over the indolent dog and say each vowel and consonant sound slowly and deliberately. Dissect the sentence word for word and word for word within each word, sound by sound. For example, with quick, you would say the K sound, the W sound, the short I sound and the last K sound, paying attention to how each is created. As you are doing this, observe the movement of your articulators in order to make each sound. See how your tongue makes contact with different areas of your mouth when making different consonants. The way your lips form different vowels. The opening and closing of your jaw. This increased physical awareness of the movements involved in speech is very important to good articulation. To begin, overemphasize the movement to develop muscular memory. This may seem strange or unnatural, but this overstatement serves to create stronger patterns which will ultimately become second nature at a more natural level. These 3 exercises, self-assessment, tongue twisters and sound-by-sound articulation, are the basis of your practice. Set a few minutes per day aside for each of them, and you will start to see improvements in clarity fairly rapidly. Keep in mind that articulation is a physical skill very much like playing a musical instrument or a sport. It takes daily practice to establish the muscle memory and coordination needed for effective speech. The best news is that these physical habits, once set, become more and more automatic over time. Along the way through this book, we'll add layers of complexity to your communication skills building on these basics. We'll progress from the fundamentals of clear speech to the strategic aspects that make communication most effective and impactful. The path to clear speech is one of the best investments you can make in yourself. Clear communication is a skill that benefits all aspects of life, from intimate exchanges to professional presentations, from everyday conversations to high-stakes negotiations. In our second chapter, we'll be taking a closer look at articulation mechanics, finding out how to make speech sounds with accuracy and precision. We'll be looking at the individual functions of lips, teeth, tongue, palate, and larynx in making clear speech. You'll be learning methods of honing consonants, defining vowels, and blending sounds together smoothly for natural, smooth-flowing speech. You'll learn why individual consonants hold so much of the clarity of your speech and how to prevent such frequent difficulties as dropping ending consonants or replacing sounds. We'll also look at the clarity of vowels and how to find the ideal balance between clear sound separation and easy flow of speech. This precise awareness of speech mechanics will provide you with more conscious control over your articulation, enabling you to speak with unprecedented clarity and precision. The physical basis we lay down will underpin all the communication skills you'll learn throughout this book. For the moment, start with the 3 exercises we've covered. Listen to yourself talk. Practice your tongue twisters. Investigate the individual sounds which comprise your words. These easy habits are the beginning of releasing the true potential of your voice. And with it, the full power of your ideas, your impact, and your presence here on earth. The words you utter hold power, but only truly when those words are expressed with clarity and precision. Your path to that clarity starts here with the intentional choice to open your voice and let its full potential out. Chapter 2, Speak Clearly. The air was thick with anticipation as the executive approached the podium. Her legend had preceded her, master strategist, visionary leader, changing thinker. But within minutes of her beginning, something quietly profound was being revealed. The crowd leaned in, their interest taken not only by her thoughts, but by the incredible clarity of her speech. Every word came out with crystalline clarity. Every syllable fell into the perfect shape. The consonants remained crisp and distinct. The vowels reverberated with perfect pitch. With no seeming effort, she dominated the air with nothing but the exquisite accuracy of her words. What you just saw wasn't just good public speaking. It was the expression of a deep principle of human communication. Accuracy begets power. When we speak with accuracy, we don't just communicate facts. We command attention, establish credibility, and make impact that goes well beyond our words. But what, really, does it mean to talk precisely? And more crucially, how do you become adept at this for yourself? The answer lies further down than most are aware. It's not only in the words that we use, but in how we physically go about making the sounds that form those words. This aspect of communication is generally ignored, yet it is the very foundation on which all good speech is established. When we talk of accuracy in speech, we're really discussing 2 related but different ideas, articulation and pronunciation. Although used interchangeably, these are different facets of precise speech, each with its own set of principles and methods. Articulation is the physical process of fashioning sounds. It's the exact motion of your speech organs' lips, teeth, tongue, palate, and larynx to create the specific sounds that join together to become words. Conceptualize articulation as the mechanical process, the physical artistry of speech. Pronunciation, however, involves adhering to accepted sound and accent standards in the production of words. It's all about pronouncing words correctly in line with the conventions of a given language or dialect. Whereas articulation emphasizes clarity of individual sound, pronunciation addresses the sound pattern that constitutes specific words. Both aspects are significant for communication to be effective. You may perfectly articulate every single sound, but if you mispronounce words, emphasizing the wrong syllable or employing incorrect sounds in a word's accepted pronunciation, your message will still be misunderstood or your credibility hurt. On the other hand, you might have the proper pronunciation of each word in your vocabulary. But if you do not articulate well, if you mumble or slur your sounds, your knowledge will not amount to clear communication. Together, exact articulation and proper pronunciation make up the core of clear speech. They confirm your message is not only listened to, but interpreted precisely as you meant. They dispel obstacles among your ideas and your listeners' understanding. And maybe most relevantly, they have a critical impact on the way you're perceived as a communicator and a human being. To become masters of these pieces, we must first know about the tools that we have in our hands. The physical arrangements that form words. These articulators are tools you use to mold sounds, and gaining awareness about how they operate is the preliminary step towards increasing accuracy. Let's begin with the lips. These movable structures are used to create many consonant sounds such as poo as in pat, but as in bat, as in mat, and wo as in what. They also assist in creating vowels, rounding for sounds such as in go, and o as in you. And spreading for sounds such as in me. The accurate placement and movement of your lips greatly influence the distinctness of these sounds. Your teeth are used to form certain consonants, especially fricatives. These are sounds created by blowing air through a very narrow channel. Examples are fifth as in fine, v as in vine, and the t sounds in thin and then. When your teeth are properly positioned in relation to your lips or tongue, these sounds come through clearly. If the positioning is not right, these sounds come out distorted. The tongue is probably the most flexible and vital articulator. This incredibly flexible muscle produces a wide range of sounds by modifying its shape and location in the mouth. It's used in most consonants such as T, N, L, L, K, G, S, and Gish. In addition to all vowel sounds, the tongue may touch different regions of the mouth. The teeth, the alveolar ridge, the ridge behind your upper teeth, the hard palate and the soft palate to produce distinct sounds. Its accurate location is essential for precise articulation. The palate split into the hard palate, the bony forward part of the roof of your mouth, and the soft palate, the fleshy rear part where the tongue has an interaction point. Seems that K, G, ing, and Y all have the tongue touching or approaching other parts of the palate. The soft palate also goes up to close the nasal route for non-nasal sounds and down to let air come out through the nose for sounds that are nasal like M, in and NG. Lastly, the voice box or larynx houses your vocal cords and is the source of vibration for voice sounds. When your vocal cords vibrate, they create voice sounds such as vowels and consonants like B, D, V, Z, and Z. When they are not vibrating, they create unvoiced sounds such as P, T, K, F, S, and shish. Your coordination with other articulators in producing your larynx creates all of the sounds of speech. Having knowledge about these tools will make you have more conscious control over your speech production. If you understand which articulators participate in which sounds, you can target your attention to the specific movement required for accurate speech. Such awareness is the basis for bettering both pronunciation and articulation. Now that we know about the tools, let's examine how best to use them, starting with consonant articulation. Consonants contribute the bulk of speech intelligibility. They're the scaffolding that allows words to be identifiable. When consonants are not distinct, comprehension becomes much harder, even if vowels are articulated well. One of the most prevalent articulation difficulties is omission of final consonants. And turns into an, just into just, going into goin'. This habit, though frequent in informal speech, can decrease clarity considerably, particularly when addressing groups of greater size or in a professional setting. The remedy is deliberate attention to finishing each sound, especially word endings. Practice exaggerating these final consonants initially, giving them slightly more emphasis than might seem natural until the complete pronunciation becomes habitual. Another common issue is slurring or substituting consonants. The classic example is saying dat instead of that or with instead of with. These substitutions often happen unconsciously, especially when speaking quickly. To correct this, first is to become attuned to your own patterns. Taping yourself can be very enlightening, and then practicing the proper formations with intention, paying attention to the exact placement of your articulators. To make consonant sounds sharper in general, use these exercises. First, practice blowing out plosive consonants such as B, T, D, K, and G. These consonants are made by stopping the airflow altogether and then releasing it abruptly. Overemphasize this stop-release pattern to make these sounds stronger. Second, prolong fricatives such as V, S, Z, SH, and TH. These steady consonants may be held longer than plosives. Try holding them out for seconds to build better control. Third, practice minimal pairs. These are words that have only one different consonant sound, and they sound similar to pat and bat or thin and fin. Swapping these words between one another emphasizes the exact articulator movement required for each different sound. Consonants give the foundation of understandability, while vowels provide the hue, emotion, and musicality of speech. Clear vowels not only improve understanding, but also the beauty of your speech. To master vowel sounds, one needs to learn the difference between pure vowels and diphthongs, and correcting the typical problems that hamper vowel clarity. Pure vowels have the same sound for the whole duration. Examples in English are the E sound in C, the OO sound in blue, and the A sound in father, among others. Diphthongs, on the other hand, are smooth movement from one vowel sound to another in one syllable. These include the AI in my, the OO in go, and the OI in boy. Another common problem with vowel clarity is neutralization. The tendency to blur clear vowel sounds to the neutral schwa sound, such as in the second syllable of about. Although this is normal for unstressed syllables, too much neutralization causes speech to sound mumbled or indistinct. Practice sustaining the unique quality of vowels, particularly when stressed, by overemphasizing the typical mouth position for each vowel sound. Variations in the pronunciation of vowels between regions can likewise influence clarity, especially when speaking to heterogeneously composed audiences. While regional accents contribute personality and credibility to speech, the ability to shift toward more standard pronunciation when appropriate can increase clarity in some situations. This doesn't mean eliminating your accent entirely, but rather developing the flexibility to adjust it when clarity is paramount. To achieve clearer vowel sounds, try opening your mouth more fully when speaking. Many people speak with their mouths barely open, which constrains vowel resonance. Practice dropping your jaw slightly more than feels natural to create more space for vowel sounds to resonate. Also, pay attention to the precise mouth positions for every vowel. Front vowels such as ee in C and ee in say require spreading the lips and placing the tongue forward in the mouth. Back vowels such as oo in blue and o in go require rounding the lips and placing the tongue towards the back of the mouth. Deliberately practicing these positions will help establish more distinct vowel sounds. Although clear articulation of separate sounds is necessary, natural speech includes linking these sounds together smoothly. The proper balance between clear, crisp, distinct sounds and natural flow is the key to speech that is both clear and pleasant to hear. Stuttering speech, where each word or syllable sounds separated from the others, can be as bad as mumbled speech. It develops an unnatural beat that may lead to distraction from your message. The aim is flowing transitions between sounds and keeping them distinct. Sounds tend to connect together over word boundaries in normal speech. For example, when pronouncing an apple, the in sound at the end of an carries over to the start of apple. Sounds can also assimilate or modify slightly depending on nearby sounds. For example, handbag tends to become handbag in natural speech with the in assimilating to an M before the B sound. These physiological processes assist in developing smooth speech, but without sacrificing clarity. The trick is to permit these links while at the same time providing each sound its rightful share. Practice reading somewhat more slowly at first, emphasizing the entire formation of each sound while letting them smoothly lead into each other. As you become more accustomed to this, you can build up your pace without sacrificing clarity. Aside from the bodily creation of sounds, speaking clearly also means pronouncing words properly as per accepted norms, what we refer to as pronunciation. Where articulation is about how well you produce sounds, pronunciation is about whether you're producing the correct sounds in the correct order with the correct emphasis for a word. Proper pronunciation is important for a number of reasons. First, it prevents confusion and distraction. If you get a word wrong, listeners might pay more attention to that than to your message, or they might not get your meaning at all. Second, proper pronunciation makes you sound more credible and shows that you pay attention to details. Listeners tend to, either consciously or subconsciously, equate correct pronunciation with preparation and knowledge. Third, employing accepted pronunciations also displays respect for the language and your listeners, showing that you have been careful in your communication. There are a number of common pronunciation traps that can spoil otherwise intelligible speech. Perhaps the most common is misplacing stress on syllables. Most English words have a single syllable with primary stress. It is just a bit louder, longer, and higher pitched than the rest. Get this stress wrong and even familiar words sound strange or confusing. For instance, the word record has different meanings depending on syllable stress. When stressed on the first syllable, record, it is a noun meaning documentation or accomplishment. When the stress falls on the second syllable, record, it is a verb meaning to write down or register. The same is true for most words such as present, object, contest, and permit. Silent letters are another frequent problem, letters that are written but not spoken in some words. English has a multitude of them due to its rich etymological history. Examples are the K in no, the B in doubt, the T in often, although this is becoming modified in certain dialects, and the P in psychology. Pronouncing these silent letters makes you appear as unknown to normal pronunciation. For non-native speakers, sounds that do not exist in one's native language are especially problematic. For example, most languages lack the TACH sounds of English words thin and then, causing speakers to replace similar sounds like T, D, S, or Z's. Likewise, the difference between L and is difficult for speakers of certain Asian languages. Although English vowel differences may be challenging for speakers of languages with fewer vowel sounds. Even native speakers frequently mispronounce some words. Some frequently mispronounced words are espresso, frequently pronounced as espresso. Nuclear, frequently pronounced as nuclear. Supposedly, frequently pronounced as supposedly. Specific, frequently stated as specific. Asterisk, frequently stated as asterisk. Prescription, frequently stated as prescription. Pronunciation, ironically frequently stated as pronunciation. Pronunciation needs to be improved with effort and targeted strategies. One of the best methods is active listening to clear speakers. Notice the way skilled speakers pronounce words, especially those that are in your line of work or words that you use often. News announcers, audiobook readers, and public speakers can be good role models. Dictionaries and websites are wonderful resources for verification of pronunciations. The majority of dictionaries have pronunciation aids, and numerous online dictionaries have audio pronunciations. Habituate yourself to look up uncertain words, especially prior to employing them in crucial communications. For difficult words, syllabifying them can assist. Say each syllable separately and then increasingly put them together, keeping the right stress pattern. This step-by-step approach makes difficult words easier. For those who are interested in a more systematic solution, the International Phonetic Alphabet, IPA, gives a standardized system for representing speech sounds. Although it is not necessary for most speakers to learn the whole IPA, knowing some basic phonetic symbols will enable you to read pronunciation guides in dictionaries and other materials. Having discussed the rules of articulation and pronunciation, let us now apply this knowledge with exercises to build your accuracy in speech. Our initial exercise is to enhance the flexibility and control of your articulators using what we could refer to as a mouth gym routine. Similar to the way athletes get their muscles ready before action, speakers would find it helpful to get their articulators ready. Begin with jaw exercises. Allow your mouth to relax with your jaw hanging open, then close it softly. Do this a few times, concentrating on the feeling of relaxation. Then move your jaw from side to side and forward and backward. Once more, slowly and carefully. For lip exercises, exercise by spreading your lips in an open smile and rounding them into an O shape. Then buzz your lips together, as though producing a burr sound, which enhances their flexibility and control. Tongue exercises are especially necessary because the tongue plays a part in most of the speech sounds. Practice bringing the tip of your tongue to various spots in your mouth, to the back of your top teeth, the roof of your mouth, and to the back of your bottom teeth. Next, practice curling the tip of your tongue up toward your nose and down toward your chin. Lastly, practice moving your tongue quickly from side to side. As you do these exercises, aim for slow, deliberate, and slightly exaggerated movements. The idea is to gain more conscious control over these structures so that you can articulate more accurately in speech. Our second exercise builds phonetic awareness through isolating and practicing single sounds within words. Select a paragraph from a book or article and read the passage aloud, concentrating on one particular sound at a time. For example, you could start by practicing all the S sounds in the paragraph and ensuring that each is clear and sharp. Next, do it again paying attention to all the sounds and placing your tongue correctly for each of them. Repeat this with other sounds, especially those which trouble you. Having a mirror while doing this exercise may be very helpful. It enables you to see the movements of your jaw, lips, and visible parts of your tongue, giving you visual feedback on how you're articulating. Notice how your mouth appears when you make clear sounds compared to when they're muddled, and practice getting into the positions that create clarity every time. Our last exercise constructs the habit of checking pronunciation, something that will serve you well throughout your life as a communicator. Begin to keep a running list of words that you're not sure how to pronounce. These could be words you come across in reading, but never hear spoken, technical vocabulary in your area of study, proper names, or words that simply stump you. Look up these words regularly in a good dictionary or online source with audio pronunciations. Once you've located the correct pronunciation, read the word out loud several times to reinforce the correct pattern. Make special note of which syllable gets the main stress and whether there are silent letters or unexpected sound patterns. Do this as a regular habit and you will eventually create a broader vocabulary of words that you can confidently pronounce. This exercise also creates a good mindset. The realization that double-checking pronunciation is not an indication of ignorance, but an indication of dedication to accurate communication. As you add these exercises to your regimen, keep in mind that learning precision in speech takes time. The objective is not perfection, but progress. Every day, talking a little more clearly and accurately than yesterday. The rewards of this exercise far outweigh mere correctness. When you talk with precision, you take away obstacles between your mind and your listener's comprehension. You build credibility and authority. You show respect for your audience and your message. And most importantly, perhaps, you make sure your ideas, the quality content you have to offer, get the clear articulation they need. In our next chapter, we're going to look beyond the individual sounds of words to see how you can control your sound through deliberate management of volume, pitch, rate, and pause. You'll learn how these aspects of vocal delivery can take even perfectly enunciated words and turn them into communications that really work. The distinction between being simply comprehended and being really engaging usually hinges on these finer but more influential aspects of speech. Aspects that are obscure to most, but which will soon find their way into your expanding repertoire of eloquent expression. Chapter 3, Command Your Sound. The audience sat motionless, hanging on every word. Though the content was complex, technical information that would normally induce drowsiness, the listeners remained captivated. The speaker hadn't raised her voice or gesticulated wildly. She hadn't relied on shocking statements or controversial claims. Rather, she had done something much more subtle but infinitely more potent. She had commanded the music of her voice. Sometimes her voice dipped to a virtual whisper, drawing the audience into their seats, creating an intimate relationship in spite of the size of the room. Sometimes it swelled in volume and passion, underscoring key points with unmistakable clarity. Her rhythm changed, slowing to let complex ideas sink in, picking up slightly to convey excitement. Most striking of all were her strategic silences. Moments of pure quietness that somehow did more than volumes, allowing reflection and anticipation room to breathe. What you just heard is not good speaking, simply. It's the magic of dominating sound. A plane of communication higher than the content of words per se and delving into something more fundamental, more instinctive, and eventually, more influential. In earlier chapters, we established the bedrock of clear speech through pronunciation and articulation. We were taught how to make the right sounds and pronounce words properly. These abilities are necessary, but they are merely the tip of the iceberg. Even carefully articulated words will sound dull if presented in a flat drone. A voice using purposeful variation, on the other hand, can take even plain words and make them tremendous. This aspect of communication, the rhythm and music of words, is the focus of this chapter. It's what transforms mere words into compelling communication. It's what allows you to truly command your sound. But what exactly does it mean to command your sound? The phrase suggests control, mastery, and intentionality. And indeed, these are precisely what we're aiming to develop. To command your sound means to use the full range of your vocal capabilities strategically and purposefully. It involves knowing the aspects of vocal delivery and using them deliberately to make your message clearer, more engaging, and more effective. Imagine your voice as an instrument, maybe the most versatile instrument that has ever existed. Like any instrument, it has a range of notes, dynamics, and textures. And like any instrument, it can be played with clumsy imprecision or masterful skill. The distinction is not in the instrument itself, but in how well it's played. To play this instrument well, we need to first know its elements. The aspects of vocal production that make up the music of speech. These aspects are outside of the words themselves, in the domain of how those words are presented. Volume is perhaps the most evident aspect, the loudness or softness of your voice. It's a matter of how much acoustic energy you're projecting when you speak. Volume goes from a whisper that's hardly audible to a shout that can fill a big room. Although its main job is making sure you can be heard, volume also conveys a lot of emotional and emphasis information. Pitch is the highness or lowness of your voice, where it is on the musical scale. Each voice has a natural pitch range, but within that range, we always change our pitch when speaking, producing what we refer to as inflection or intonation. Such pitch changes create patterns that carry meaning beyond what is spoken. Rate is merely how fast you talk, how fast or slow words come after each other. Rate influences not just the singing time that listeners have, but also the energy and emotion conveyed in your message. It's your vocal music tempo. Pauses are planned silences between words or phrases, where sound is absent but conversation goes on. Boring space, they are not. Pauses are very much communication tools that offer processing time, create emphasis, mark transitions, and generate anticipation. Voice quality or timbre is the individual character or color of your voice. What makes your voice distinctively you? Although we won't discuss timbre at length since it's more than half dependent on physical factors, it's worth mentioning as part of the complete set of vocal components. Altogether, these components make what we could describe as the music of speech. The melody, rhythm, and dynamics that are associated with your words. And just as with music, this aspect of speech is incredibly powerful to engage, to move, and to persuade. The potential of vocal variety is incredible. When we communicate in a variety of volume, pitch, rate, and planned pauses, we build a dynamic experience that has a natural ability to capture and hold attention. On the other hand, when we talk in a monotone with minimal variation of these factors, we essentially assure disengagement. This fact is not an anecdotal observation. The human mind is designed to detect change and to become accustomed to constancy. When something is constant, such as a monotone voice, eventually our brains screen it out as background noise. However, when something varies, such as a voice with variable delivery, our focus is constantly re-grabbed. This is why monotone literally kills engagement. It elicits a neurological tuning out reaction. Beyond keeping attention, vocal variety introduces depths of meaning, emotion, and emphasis to what you're saying. Think about how the simple sentence, "I didn't say that," can have entirely different meanings based upon which word is emphasized through increased loudness, higher pitch, or slower speech. Emphasize "I," and you imply someone else uttered it. Emphasize "didn't," and you deny uttering it altogether. Emphasize "that," and you suggest you said something else. The words are the same, but the meaning shifts radically based only on vocal delivery. Vocal variety also relates directly to perceived energy and passion. A speaker who employs their full vocal range is generally seen as more engaged, more committed, and more passionate about their topic. This is important because listeners are not going to be more interested in your message than you seem to be interested in it yourself. When your voice sounds energetic and confident, it tells listeners that your message is important and they need to listen. With this definition of vocal elements and their significance, let's see how to master each one, starting with volume, the element most closely related to hearing. Determining the appropriate level of volume is an environmental challenge that involves taking a number of factors into account. First, look at the surroundings, the room size, the amount of background noise and the acoustics of the room. A small quiet space with favorable acoustics can be covered by less volume than a big noisy room with poor reflectivity. Optimal volume also depends on audience size. Larger crowds tend to need more projection not only due to greater distance, but also due to the combined presence of more bodies that absorb sound. But with much contemporary amplification available in many venues, this consideration may be less significant than it used to be. Perhaps most important is understanding the difference between projection and shouting. Projection involves using proper breath support and vocal technique to increase volume without strain. Shouting by contrast involves forcing volume through tension in the throat, which not only sounds harsh but can also damage your voice over time. The goal is to be comfortably audible to everyone in your audience without creating the aggressive impression that shouting conveys. In addition to mere audibility, volume can be employed strategically to better communicate. Varying volume for emphasis is one of the most valuable skills in a speaker's arsenal. Raising your volume slightly on important words or phrases naturally makes them stand out, indicating their significance. It's especially useful to use selectively and not continually. Counterintuitively, dropping your volume sometimes can be more effective than raising it. By speaking more softly but still making yourself heard, you tend to create an air of confidentiality and closeness that invites people in. They physically and psychologically lean forward to hear what you have to say. This method achieves an intimacy in which your message seems more personal than performative. No matter how you modulate volume, it is vital to maintain consistent audibility in your communication. Nothing discredits a message faster than sections that just aren't audible. This equates to being careful to sustain an adequate volume even toward the end of sentences where many speakers fall off. And being especially conscious of projection when turning away from the audience or looking down at notes. The engine that powers volume is breath support, specifically diaphragmatic breathing. Unlike shallow chest breathing, which provides limited air and creates tension, diaphragmatic breathing engages the large muscle at the base of your lungs, the diaphragm, to draw air deeply into your lungs. This allows the constant airflow required for long-term controlled volume without strain. To exercise diaphragmatic breathing, put one hand on your chest and one on your belly just below your rib cage. Breathe in slowly through your nose, concentrating on pressing your lower hand outward while letting your upper hand remain relatively stationary. This means you're filling the bottom of your lungs by using your diaphragm. When you breathe out, your lower hand should come in first. Do this practice regularly until it comes naturally to you. Then start to use it whenever you're speaking, particularly when you must project. Volume makes sure you can be heard, but pitch gives color and meaning to your words. Knowing how to employ pitch effectively starts with an understanding of its emotional connotation. Higher pitches are used to express excitement, surprise or doubt. Lower pitches to express seriousness, authority or certainty. These are not random associations. They represent patterns held across cultures and languages. Pitch change also has grammatical purposes. Rising inflection, where rising pitch at the end of an utterance typically indicates a question or doubt. You're going to the meeting with rising inflection becomes a question. Although, you're going to the meeting with falling inflection is a statement. Falling inflection where declining pitch at the end indicates completion or finality works in a parallel manner. These patterns assist listeners not only in understanding what you are saying, but also how they should interpret it. Perhaps the most frequent vocal delivery problem is the monotone trap. Speaking with little or no variation of pitch. Not only does this pattern bore the listener, but it also constricts your range of expression and can invalidate your message's power. To stay out of this trap, begin by finding out your natural range of pitch. Speak naturally on tape on a topic that interests you, and listen to find your highest and lowest comfortable pitches. These are your vocal range, the area between which you can control your pitch to some extent. Having determined your range, exercise deliberate pitch variation on significant words. Take a sentence and play with putting stress on various words by changing the pitch on each. Pay attention to how meaning changes with every variation. For example, in the sentence, "I think this approach will work," raising your pitch on this emphasizes the specific approach being discussed, while raising it on work emphasizes your confidence in the outcome. The key is connecting pitch changes to the meaning you want to convey. Ask yourself what emotion or emphasis each phrase requires, then adjust your pitch accordingly. Is this a moment of excitement that calls for higher pitch? A serious point that needs the authority of lower pitch? A question that should end with rising inflection? By making these connections explicit, you transform pitch from an unconscious habit to a strategic tool. Beyond word-level pitch changes, broader intonation patterns shape the overall flow of your communication. Each language has typical intonation patterns, the melodic contours that native speakers unconsciously adopt. In English, sentences usually follow a pattern in which pitch rises slightly at the start, stays relatively level in the middle and drops at the end. Questions usually reverse this with rising pitch at the end. Paying attention to such patterns allows you to use them more skillfully and prevent unconscious patterns that could mislead listeners. Intonation also conveys importance and organization within your message. Important points usually gain from a greater range of pitch, more expressive rises and falls indicating importance. Secondary points usually employ a more limited range. Similarly, new topics often begin with higher pitch that gradually descends as the topic develops, signaling the arc of a complete thought. These structural signals help listeners organize the information they're receiving, enhancing comprehension and retention. While volume and pitch color your words, rate, the speed of your delivery determines how much time listeners have to process them. Finding your optimal speaking rate involves balancing several factors and avoiding the pitfalls of extremes. Speaking too quickly creates obvious problems. Clarity is lost as sounds become compressed and distinctions are lost. Listeners are overwhelmed, unable to process one thought before the next one comes along. They simply give up trying to keep up, particularly if the material is complex or unfamiliar. Fast speech also creates a perception of nervousness or insecurity, which erodes your perceived confidence. Talking too slowly produces other but equally undesirable problems. Listeners can get bored or impatient, their minds drifting to fill the gaps between words. Extremely slow speech can also be taken as condescending or uncertain, neither of which improves your credibility. The optimum is a conversational sweet spot that provides for both clarity and interest. For speaking in public, a rule of about 125 to 150 words per minute tends to work well, though this is highly dependent on the complexity of content and cultural considerations. This is a rate which enables listeners to absorb information without feeling rushed or delayed. It's not, however, best to think of a specific figure, but to consider matching your rate to that which your listeners need to process. More nuanced or unfamiliar material tends to do better at a slower rate, whereas known or simple material may be delivered more rapidly without loss of understanding. Beyond your standard rate, deliberate variation establishes interest and emphasis. Pausing for crucial or difficult concepts assigns them greater significance and allows listeners more processing time. This method works especially well on major points, substantive ideas, or moving moments that need additional space to land. On the other hand, increasing slightly can indicate excitement, urgency, or developing momentum. This is a technique to be used sparingly because it is so easy to slide into unintelligible from energetic. The secret is keeping clarity while picking up pace. Enunciating clearly while shortening pauses instead of squashing sounds. And maybe most critically, your pace needs to reflect the emotional content of what you are communicating. Enthusiasm, urgency, or excitement naturally demand a faster rate that matches and supports these feelings. Gravity, sorrow, or contemplation usually require a slower rate that allows for reflection. This congruence between rate and emotional content builds authenticity and impact. Although the elements we've covered so far include sound, equally effective is the intentional use of silence through pauses. Anything but empty space or dead air, pauses are living communication tools that perform several important functions. Secondly, pauses provide listeners with time to process. The human mind requires time to take in, make sense of, and relate new information to what it already knows. When you talk unceasingly without stopping, you deprive listeners of this processing time, risking flooding them with unbroken input. Purposeful pauses provide mental space for understanding, especially following complicated or critical points. Pauses also generate stress or emphasis preceding or following significant points. Pausing before a crucial statement creates suspense, hinting that something is about to be made. Pausing after a crucial point makes room for it to sink in, rather than being immediately eclipsed by what comes next. These emphasis pauses greatly enhance the power and memorability of your strongest ideas. Pauses also indicate transitions between concepts, serving as audible paragraph breaks that assist listeners in organizing information. A bit more pause after major points signifies transitioning to a new topic or area, giving room for listeners to mentally record what they have just been told before creating room for new information. This structural role adds overall clarity and coherence to your communication. Lastly, pauses allow you as the speaker time to breathe and think. Even well-rehearsed speakers find benefit from taking moments to collect thoughts, glance at notes, or simply inhale. These small respites serve to keep you calm and in control in your delivery so that you do not get that hurried feeling associated with speaking without pauses. There are different functions for pauses in your communication. Grammatical pauses naturally fall at punctuation marks. Short pauses at commas, slightly longer at periods, semicolons, or colons. Such pauses serve to clarify the grammatical structure of your sentences, making them more readable. Rhetorical pauses specifically for effect to add emphasis, create suspense, or permit a point to penetrate. Such pauses tend to be longer than grammatical pauses and are positioned strategically to maximize effect. A properly placed rhetorical pause can make a point more memorable than any change in volume or pitch. Pregnant pauses create anticipation by producing a moment of tension before stating an important or unexpected point. These long silences engage listeners, and they lean forward, wanting to hear what is next. Used sparingly, pregnant pauses can be used to create strong moments of connection and influence. Intentional pauses are helpful to communication, but unintentional filled pauses tend to undermine it. Filled pauses involve filler words such as, like, and sentences like you know or sort of that take up time without contributing to meaning. These speaking habits grow unconsciously as means of maintaining possession of the floor during thought, but they can be distracting if used excessively. The first step toward resolving filled pauses is merely awareness of your own patterns. Tape yourself in conversation or presentation and listen particularly for fillers. Most find themselves amazed at how often they use some words or sounds and don't even know it. Once you have an awareness of your habits, practice substituting fillers with deliberate silence. When you catch yourself wanting to say or like, just pause instead. This is uncomfortable initially. Silence takes longer to the speaker than it does to the listener. But with repetition, it becomes more automatic. Keep in mind that a pause spoken clearly sounds confident and considered, whereas filled pauses tend to sound uncertain. Some tips can minimize the use of fillers. Preparation minimizes having to think on one's feet, which lowers filler use. Deliberately slowing down provides you with more time to think without fillers. A well-defined structure allows you to move smoothly between points without verbal bridges. And practice, mental rehearsal as well as actual practice of speaking gradually eliminates reliance on these verbal crutches. Having now discussed each aspect of vocal delivery, let's apply the knowledge with some exercises to help you build command of sound. Our first exercise is to develop your awareness and control of range of pitch and volume. Select an easy sentence, a neutral one such as "Today is a beautiful day," and repeat it out loud continuously, deliberately changing your pitch and volume in various combinations. Begin by reading it at your usual pitch and volume as a reference point. Then practice it with increased pitch and normal volume, then decreased pitch and normal volume. Next, Keep your normal pitch, but vary volume, then reduce volume. Finally, play around with combinations. High pitch and loud volume, high pitch and soft volume, low pitch and loud volume, low pitch and soft volume. Practice these variations paying attention to control and intentionality, not just random change. Can you sustain a single pitch throughout the sentence? Can you alter volume without altering pitch? Which is surprisingly difficult. Can you make smooth transitions between changing and stable levels of pitch and volume? This exercise works on both sensitivity to these aspects and physical control to use them effectively. Our second drill builds skill at controlling speaking pace. Choose a paragraph of perhaps 100 to 200 words. Maybe a book or article paragraph. First, read the passage at your regular pace to have a baseline. Then read the same passage very slowly compared to feeling natural, with careful articulation and good pauses. Next, read it a bit quicker than your own comfortable speed, keeping clarity. Lastly, try varying the pace within the passage, slowing down for key information, slightly accelerating for less pressing facts. If you want to find it useful, set a timer or word counter to measure your pace. Take your baseline reading and count the words to determine your natural words per minute. Practice targeting specific levels after that, maybe 100 WPM for your slow reading and 150 to 175 WPM for your quicker reading. This objective information aids in the development of your awareness of varying rates and your conscious control of them. Our last exercise is on the strategic employment of pauses. Use a short passage, say 50 to 100 words, and indicate possible locations for pauses. Add grammatical pauses between punctuation marks, emphasis pauses after or before a dominant word or phrase, and transition pauses among major ideas. Then read the text aloud respecting these indicated pauses. Begin by lengthening the pauses a little more than feels natural. Maybe silently counting to 2 for small pauses and to 3 for significant ones. This overstatement facilitates the development of the habit of pausing consciously. As the habit becomes more familiar, you can refine to more natural pause lengths while still keeping the strategic placement. Recording yourself during this exercise provides valuable feedback on the effect of your pauses. Often, what feels like an uncomfortably long silence to the speaker sounds perfectly appropriate or even brief to the listener. The recording helps calibrate your internal sense of timing with the actual listener experience. As you add these exercises to your practice routine, keep in mind that commanding your sound is a technical skill and an expressive art. The technical skills, control over volume, pitch, rate and pauses lay the foundation, but the artistry enters in applying these elements expressively for infusing meaning, evoking emotion and connecting with listeners. The final objective is not precision machinery, but true expression. Drawing on the full capacity of your voice to convey with clarity, engagement and power. When you own your sound, your voice becomes not only a means of expressing words, but a forceful instrument of communication in its own right. The rewards of such mastery far outweigh formal speaking circumstances. In conversations, meetings, phone calls, and video conferences that are part of your daily life, your skill in using volume, pitch, rate, and pause strengthens your listening, being heard, and remembered. It supports you in putting stress on what is essential, building rapport, and expressing confidence and capability. When we get to our next chapter, we'll learn how to structure your thinking for greatest clarity and effect. Under the sounds of your voice is the design of your ideas. The architecture that takes isolated words and sentences and converts them into sensible, engaging communication. This invisible framework, imperceptible to the ear, yet critical to comprehension, determines the reception of your message, even more deeply perhaps than the way it's presented. The choice between being followed and being forgotten may not be as much in what you're saying or how you're saying it as it is in the unseen template that takes your listeners on a tour of your concepts. Chapter 4, Structure with Purpose. Two speakers before the same crowd on the same multifaceted subject. Both shared equal knowledge, equally similar voice and equally similar delivery style, but their effect couldn't have been more disparate. The opening speaker started with a great opener, then wandered through a set of points that were only linked by their own thoughts. Ideas were introduced haphazardly with no apparent progression or linkage. Key points were mixed in with minor details. At the close, the audience was baffled and disinterested, fighting to explain what they had just experienced. The second presenter also started with a good opening hook. Then something astonishing transpired. They explicitly mentioned what they would discuss. Their arguments flowed in an orderly pattern, each one supporting the previous one. Transitions tied concepts together effortlessly. Most importantly, key concepts were front and center. By the time they finished and outlined their major points, the listeners nodded in recognition, capable of recalling and explaining what they'd learned. What distinguished these speakers wasn't what they were talking about or even how they delivered it. It was something more basic, but often not apparent, the intellectual architecture behind their ideas. The second speaker had learned something that escapes many communicators. That framework is not just an organizational nicety, but the very foundation on which understanding is based. This unseen infrastructure, this blueprint for understanding, is what we'll examine in this chapter. It's a level of communication that works below the surface of words and vocal tone, but impacts the listener's experience more deeply than possibly any other component. It's what takes a set of sentences and makes it into a coherent message that can be followed, understood, and remembered. But what do we mean by structure in communication, and why do you need it so badly? Fundamentally, structure is the intentional organization of ideas into a rational coherent pattern. It's the scaffolding that keeps your content together. The bones that provide your message with shape and support. Structure is what decides not only what you communicate but also how you communicate it, the connections you make between ideas and the stress you emphasize on various elements. Structure matters because the human mind craves order. We are pattern-seeking creatures, constantly looking for organization and meaning in the information we receive. When we encounter a well-structured message, our minds can process it efficiently, following the path laid out for us. When we encounter a poorly structured message, we must expend significant mental energy trying to impose order on chaos, energy that could be more profitably used interacting with the content itself. This requirement of order is not just preference, it's cognitive need. The human brain only has so much bandwidth for receiving new information. When information hits us in a chaotic flow, we immediately get bogged down, unable to discern what matters or how ideas connect to one another. Working memory gets overburdened and understanding takes a hit. An organized structure enables people to stay with your train of thought without losing their way. It presents a rational journey from one concept to the next, giving an impression of flow and continuity. Instead of grappling to link separate points, people can concentrate on understanding and responding to your message. Structure also considerably lessens the cognitive load on listeners. If information is logically structured, the brain doesn't have to think as much to interpret it. This releases mental energy for more profound processing, critical thinking, and memory. The less effort listeners must expend to organize your thoughts, the more they can allocate to comprehending them. Perhaps most significantly, structure facilitates recall and memory. Information that is delivered in a structured framework is much easier to recall than information delivered at random. This is because structure offers a mental scaffolding, a network of connections and relationships that assist in anchoring information in memory. When listeners are able to visualize how ideas connect to one another within a unified structure, they're much more likely to recall those ideas afterwards. The advantages of structure work for you, the speaker, too. Clear structure avoids wandering and tangents. Those points where you get lost and wander off into useless space. When you have a good framework to work from, you always know where you stand in your message and where you're headed next. This maintains your communication on track and goal-oriented. This sense of direction gives you confidence. When you know exactly where you're going with your communication, you're less likely to feel nervous about losing your place or forgetting what to say next. You can concentrate on delivery instead of desperately trying to recall what's next. This confidence is evident in your presentation, and it makes you more credible and effective. Structure also provides a guarantee that all the salient points will be addressed sensibly. With no planned structure, it becomes simple to lose track of what is important or to present points in a disorderly manner. A well-built framework guarantees proper attention to all the salient points and getting them in their most suitable places within the context of the bigger message. Probably the most popular and effective structural method is exceptionally straightforward. Most commonly referred to as the tell format, it may be boiled down to, tell them what you're going to tell them, and tell them what you've told them. This simple process has lasted centuries because it happens to coincide perfectly with how the human brain accepts and recalls information. The initial, tell, is your setup where you outline what is coming. This gets the audience in the right mindset, setting up expectations and a foundation for understanding. It's like giving someone directions on a map before they go on a journey, so they know the way and where they're going. The second tell is the meat of your message, where you present your content in a clear, structured manner. This is the journey itself, the meat of your message. The third tell is your conclusion, in which you recap what you've discussed. This reinforces major points and assists in cementing them in memory. It's like going over the journey once it's done, pointing out the major landmarks passed along the way. This basic structure works because it is consistent with how memory works. The preview builds anticipation and a mental structure. The content fills out that structure. The summary reinforces what has been learned, making retention more likely. Simple as it is, or maybe because it is, this structure is still one of the best methods for structuring any message. With this knowledge of why structure is important, let's discuss how to write each element of a well-structured message, starting with the introduction. The introduction is the portal to your message, and its value usually determines if listeners will be drawn in by what comes next. A good introduction does several important things. Most importantly, it captures attention, engaging the audience right from the beginning. In an era of endless distractions and short attention spans, this initial hooking is critical. Without it, even the most worthwhile content will fall on deaf ears. The introduction also discloses the subject and announces your intent, clearly outlining what you'll be talking about. This makes it easier for listeners to determine if your message is of interest to them and get them ready for what's ahead. Ambiguity or vagueness here causes confusion that can weaken the rest of your communication. Establishing credibility or goodwill briefly answers the unspoken question in every listener's mind. Why should I listen to you? This does not take a lot of credentials or self-promotion, but sufficient information to ensure transparency that you are a reliable source on the subject matter. Last, the introduction foreshadows your main points and gives a roadmap for the listener. This foreshadowing generates expectations and creates a mental framework which enables listeners to organize the information being presented to them. It's like providing them with the chapter headings ahead of time so that they know how the pieces will go together. There are a number of ways that can grab attention at the start of your message. A rhetorical question activates the minds of the audience, and they'll be thinking about their own response. Have you ever thought about why some individuals are able to command attention the moment they open their mouths, and others cannot get a word in edgewise? This kind of opening causes instant mental involvement with your subject. Beginning with a shocking statistic or fact can cause instant interest by surprise or alarm. 3 out of 4 individuals indicate that they feel nervous about speaking in public more than they fear death. Surprising or dramatic information tends to grab attention and generate interest in what comes next. Employing a powerful quote can tap into the wisdom or credibility of others to engage listeners. Maya Angelou once stated, "Words mean more than what is written on paper." It takes the human voice to give them a richer meaning. Carefully selected quotes can set up the theme of your message and add credibility and interest. Relating the topic directly to the audience makes the relevance immediate and personal. The ability to structure your thoughts clearly will determine whether your next big idea gets implemented or ignored. When listeners understand how your topic affects them personally, their attention naturally sharpens. After capturing attention, clearly stating your purpose and previewing your main points creates the framework for everything that follows. A brief thesis or purpose statement sets the limits and scope of your message. This declaration must be detailed enough to give clear guidance but general enough to include all your key points. Today, I'll demonstrate how strategic structure can turn your communication from muddled to magnetic. Gives a clear focus while establishing expectations. After your purpose statement, add a preview of main points to finish the roadmap. We'll discuss 3 key components of good structure: creating a compelling introduction, organizing your content logically, and crafting a memorable conclusion. This preview helps listeners anticipate what's coming and understand how the pieces will fit together. It creates mental folders ready to receive and organize the information you'll present. With a strong introduction in place, the focus shifts to building a logical body. The core of your message, where main ideas are presented and developed. It starts by establishing your major points, which are essentially the major points supporting your general purpose. Best communications should have 2 to 5 major points. 2 or fewer might not be enough to sustain your purpose. 5 or more becomes too hard for listeners to follow and keep track of. The number varies with your purpose, time limitations, and complexity of each point. These main points should be distinct from each other with minimal overlap. Each should represent a separate aspect or dimension of your overall topic. They should also be relatively balanced in importance and development. While perfect equality isn't necessary, significant imbalance, where one point receives extensive treatment while others are barely mentioned, creates a lopsided message that confuses listeners about your priorities. Each main point should be phrased clearly and concisely. Strive for wording that is detailed enough to be significant, yet concise enough to be remembered. Strong structure increases audience understanding, is more precise and easier to remember than then. The use of strategic patterns of organization in spoken language has been shown to support increased cognitive processing and retention of information among listeners in different situations. Once you've determined your key points, the next thing to do is select an organizational pattern that will suit your purpose and content best. Various kinds of content naturally adapt to different structures. Chronological order follows a sequence of time from earlier to later events or stages. This order is suitable for processes, historical events, or any material with an inherent time progression. The history of communication technology has evolved in 3 broad stages: the print era, the broadcast era, and the digital era. Spatial order organizes information by physical location or direction. This order is convenient for defining objects, locations, or physical relationships. Understanding the voice of the human involves looking at 3 things: the diaphragm and lungs, the articulators, and the vocal cords. Topical organization divides the major topic into rational subtopics without adhering to a sequence in time or space. This adaptable pattern is suitable for much content in which the points relate to one another conceptually rather than sequentially. Successful communication is dependent on 3 factors: clear structure, compelling delivery, and pertinent content. Problem-solution organization begins with the identification of a problem or need and then suggests a solution or reaction. This organization pattern is very effective in persuasive messages when you're pushing for a certain action or strategy. Disorganized communication is a challenge most professionals face. Using the structure principles outlined in this chapter will help resolve this issue. Cause-effect organization demonstrates the relationship between causes and their outcome or effect and their source. This structure explains why something occurs or what the outcome could be as a result of some conditions. Bad message structure results in 3 undesirable effects: confusion, disengagement, and lost content. Your purpose and the type of your content should guide your selection of organizational pattern. The most logical structure is the one that produces the most logical flow for your particular message. Occasionally you may blend patterns, possibly employing problem solution for the overall pattern and topically organizing the solution section. Having chosen your organizational pattern, the next task is to construct each of the main points well. This construction starts with explicitly stating the main point itself, delineating the central idea in straightforward comprehensible terms. This sentence is a signpost, warning listeners that you're transitioning to a new major part of your message. After this sentence, you'll present supporting material that explains, clarifies, or substantiates the main point. This support may take the form of examples, statistics, expert views, explanations, or other evidence suitable to your subject. The exact kinds of supporting material will be discussed in greater depth in Chapter 6. But the general rule is that every main point must be well developed in order to be thoroughly understood and believed. Also crucial is describing the relationship between your supporting material and main point it is intended to support. Never expect listeners to have automatic insights about how evidence applies to your point. Make these relationships clear. This is how structure aids memory through the establishment of a framework within which new information can be stored. These links of explanation ensure that your support does more than just provide extra information but also strengthens your points. As you progress through your main points, cohesion becomes increasingly important. Without explicit connections between ideas, well-organized points can become fragmented, leaving listeners trying to piece together how things relate. Transitions and signposts are the key to where. Transitions are words, phrases or sentences which link ideas through the demonstration of their relationship. They indicate a shift from one point to the next and reveal how these points are related to one another. Good transitions promote a sense of flow and development rather than separate ideas. Connecting elements reveal multiple relationships between ideas. They may signal addition, in addition, moreover, contrast, however, on the other hand, conversely, cause effect, therefore, as a result, consequently, sequence, first, next, finally, or example, for instance, to illustrate, as an example. Aside from individual words or short phrases, more sophisticated transitions make stronger connections. Internal summaries provide a brief review of the just-made point prior to continuing on. So we've observed how structure lowers cognitive load for listeners. Next, let's consider how it boosts retention. Internal previews give an indication of what's about to come. Having discussed the value of having good main points, let's proceed to how the points are organized. These more sophisticated transitions are especially useful when transitioning between significant portions of your message or when connections may not be readily apparent to listeners. They assist in filling possible gaps in knowledge and in keeping the logical progression of your ideas intact. Accompanying transitions are signposts, short phrases that tell the listener where you are within the organization of your message. These verbal indicators assist the audience in following along with your communication. The first of the essential elements of good structure is going on to our second main point. Last but not least, let's look at. Signposts are like road signs, guiding listeners through your message and keeping them oriented. They remind listeners of the structure you've established in your introduction and of the pattern you're working to. This reminder is especially useful in longer messages, when listeners may lose their sense of where they are in the overall structure. Signposts also stress the significance of main points by actually indicating them. By saying something like the most important thing to keep in mind is, you are signaling to listeners that particular care should be given to what comes next. This marking helps listeners sort out main points from supporting facts, establishing proper hierarchies of significance. As you near the end of your message, forming a memorable conclusion is your last structural chore. The conclusion is the final chance to reinforce your message and make a lasting impression. Similar to the introduction, it plays several specific functions. First, the conclusion marks the end of your communication. This may be self-evident, but explicit verbal markers that you're concluding prepare listeners mentally for the termination of your message. Sentences such as, in summary, to recap, or as we have observed, signal that you're approaching the end of your message. The conclusion also recapitulates your main points, reiterating the key points you wish listeners to retain. The recap is a memory aid, emphasizing the most significant aspects of your message. Since listeners generally recall the start and conclusion of a message more than the middle, this concluding reinforcement greatly aids in retention. Last but not least, the conclusion gives closure or an imperative, leaving an impression. This may include motivating listeners, inspiring them to do something, challenging them to put into practice what they've gained or encouraging certain action. The conclusion must leave a feeling of finality while also giving direction for consequences or utilization. There are a number of techniques that can produce good conclusions. Paraphrasing your thesis and main points in different words restates your message without repetition. This is not a matter of repeating yourself, but rephrasing it in new words that get to the heart of your message. Concluding with an influential quotation can leave with a lasting impression that sums up your message. As Winston Churchill once stated, if you have a point you need to make, don't try to be subtle or clever. Have a pile driver. Hit the point once, and then hit it again. Then hit it once more. A huge whack. The proper quotation has the power to give your conclusion dignity and eloquence. Going back to the beginning gives a sense of completion, a method often described as bookending. If you started with a question, respond to it. If you started with a situation, go back to it with a new understanding. This bookend structure makes the audience feel resolved and complete. Presenting a challenge or call to action provides listeners with something concrete to do with the information you've given them. From today onwards, use these structure principles to each vital communication. Your thoughts should be heard and your audience should be given clarity. This forward-thinking aspect turns passive listening into possible action. Concluding with the last lingering image or thought sticks in people's minds. Structure and communication is like the foundation of a building, unseen to superficial observers, but holding up all that stands above it. A strong last image or impression usually ends up being the most memorable part of your whole message. Having covered the elements of good structure, let's practice what we've learned with exercises to help you build your structural skills. Our first exercise is about building complete outlines. Select a straightforward subject you know something about, maybe a process you're familiar with or a concept you have a clear understanding of. Make a complete sentence outline with an introduction, body, employing one of the organization patterns we have discussed, and conclusion. For introduction, use an attention getter, a clear purpose statement, and main point preview. For the body, determine 2 to 4 major points that align with your purpose. And below each major point, add 2 or more bits of supporting information. Insert transitions among major points to indicate relationships between them. For conclusion, use a closing signal, major point summary, and final thought or call to action. As you construct this outline, aim for clear main points and logical order between them. Ask yourself, does each main point directly serve my purpose? Are my main points clearly different from one another? Does the organizational pattern I've chosen create a logical flow? Would someone reading only my main points be able to understand the general structure of my message? Our second exercise increases your vocabulary of transition words and phrases. Make a list of transitions for various relationship types. Addition, linking similar concepts. Contrast, linking distinct or opposite concepts. Cause-effect, indicating causality. Sequence, indicating order or progression. Example, introducing images or instances. Challenge yourself to use more than the most frequent transitions. Rather than simply first, second, third, try alternatives such as initially, then, finally. Rather than always, for example, attempt to illustrate, take this instance or a case in point. This mix will make your transitions more varied and accurate. Practice inserting varied transitions into the outline you created after the first exercise once you have your list. Substitute general transitions with more specific ones that accurately indicate the relationships between your ideas. Observe how varying transitions can make a difference in the way the relationship between ideas is perceived. Our last exercise is about writing effective introductions and conclusions. Using the plan you drew up in the first exercise, produce 2 different introductions and 2 different conclusions, each employing different techniques. For the introductions, you could attempt one starting with a rhetorical question and one starting with an unexpected fact. For the conclusions, perhaps one could conclude with a call to action, and another employs a vivid image or idea. After you write these versions, decide which versions best meet the purposes of introduction and conclusion. Which introduction is most effectively grabs attention and previews clearly what is to come. Which conclusion is most strongly affirming your message and leaving the most lasting impact. This analysis will enable you to develop a sense for what makes openings and closings highly effective. As you progress through these exercises, keep in mind that structure is neither a formula nor a template but a framework. The rules we've outlined can be modified according to different contexts and uses. A spontaneous description to a friend may employ a less complicated structure than a formal presentation, but the essence of the requirement for logical structure is identical. The objective is not flawless observance of structural principles, but clear communication that enables listeners to comprehend, connect with, and recall your message. Structure accomplishes this objective by providing a clear route through your thoughts. A route that you and your listeners can travel with confidence. The advantages of structure mastery reach far beyond formal speaking contexts. In casual conversation, emails, meetings, and discussions, transparent structure enhances your communication efficiency and effectiveness. It makes you more articulate, understood more precisely, and more influential with your words. In our next chapter, we'll examine a facet of communication that takes bland messages and turns them into focused ones. Past what you say and how you organize it is a key question. To whom are you saying it? The answer to this question influences every detail of effective communication, from the examples you use to the words you use. This unseen variable, even to the most seasoned communicators, may make or break whether your exquisitely crafted, eloquently organized message touches people's hearts or lands with a thud. Connection or lack of it will frequently depend on this one component that we're going to explore together. Chapter 5, Know Your People. The presentation was perfect, or so the speaker believed. Her articulation was sharp, her voice authoritative, her organization flawless. She had spent weeks honing every detail of her speech, each sentence carefully written, each pause and inflection practiced until they felt natural. By any measure of technique, it was a work of public speaking art. But as she gazed out at her audience, she noticed furrowed brows, roving eyes, and the telltale blue light of smartphone screens. No matter how technically proficient she was, something fundamental was lacking. Something so basic that without it, all of her talent and training had been for nothing. What had happened? The reason is in a level of communication beyond technique, structure, and even content itself. It's an element so strong that it can make a technically flawless presentation fail or turn a plain message into deep impact. It's the secret ingredient that makes your words resonate or just bounce off your audience. This missing ingredient wasn't about the speaker either. It was about the ones on the receiving end of her message. In her careful attention to what she wanted to say and how she wanted to say it, she had neglected to ask the most important question of all: to whom was she saying it? This question and the deep shift of perspective it embodies is the center of what it means to know your people. But the words in this sentence carry with them depths that can be difficult to see at first glance. They say something profound about communication that is never entirely clear to most speakers. That good communication isn't about you, the speaker. It's about them, the listener. This sounds simple, but it's one of the biggest blind spots in the way most people communicate. We automatically start with ourselves, with what we have to say, what interests us, what we think matters. We build messages from our own point of view in language that is meaningful to us, examples that speak to our experiences, and arguments that are consonant with our values. This speaker-focused style feels authentic because it begins where we're at. But it too frequently falls short for the very same reason that it never makes that important trip to where our listeners are. We get communication that's technically good, but existentially out of touch with the people it needs to connect with. The solution is audience-centered communication. A method that doesn't start with what you're going to say, but where you're saying it to. It places your listeners' needs, interests, and viewpoints ahead of your own convenience or preferences. It acknowledges that communication is not simply the exchange of information, but the building of understanding, connection, and resonance. This new focus on listener changes everything about communication. It alters what you communicate, how you communicate, and the effect your words end up having. It's the distinction between talking to people and talking about them, between being heard and being understood. The limitations of having only what you want to say become apparent when we look at how communication really works. Communication is not merely about sending messages. It's about messages being received, understood, and responded to. If the audience is not hearing your message, is not finding it relevant, or is not accepting it as credible, then no communication has really happened, no matter how well you've spoken. Audience-centered communication acknowledges this fact and responds by putting the audience's needs and points of view first in the development of the message. Instead of starting with, "What do I want to say?" it starts with, "What does my audience need to hear?" Instead of asking, "How can I communicate my ideas clearly?" it asks, "How will my audience best hear and relate to these ideas?" This method doesn't downplay the significance of your message or your expertise. Instead, it makes sure that your knowledge and understanding are framed in terms that can be truly received and appreciated by whom you're speaking to. It understands that the true purpose of communication is not to simply get your point across, but to make resonance and connection. To have your message heard, but also accepted. This shift in thinking is more than a philosophical position. It's a practical requirement for good communication. Audience analysis, careful consideration of who your audience is and what is important to them, is important for a number of specific reasons. For one thing, knowing your audience enables you to enhance relevance and engagement. When your message resonates with your audience's interests, concerns, and experiences, they're inevitably more engaged and attentive. They immediately understand why they ought to care about what you are saying instead of having to come to that realization themselves, or worse, never understanding the relevance at all. Second, audience analysis improves understanding by allowing you to meet your audience where they are. Once you know what your listeners already know about your subject, you can bridge from what they already know to new information. You can prevent wasting time explaining what they already know and causing boredom, and preventing skipping necessary background they require, creating confusion. Thirdly, understanding your audience makes you a better persuader by enabling you to speak directly to their particular concerns and values. Arguments that are persuasive to you can fail with another audience if they don't mesh with their values or worldview. When you know what your listeners care about, you can build your message in terms that resonate with their values and speak to their specific issues. Lastly, audience analysis prevents you from accidentally offending or misunderstanding someone. Various audiences might receive the same words or illustrations differently due to their histories, experiences, or cultural settings. What may be perfectly clear or suitable to you may be bewildering or in fact offensive to others. Knowing these possible differences enables you to speak more sensitively and proficiently. To know these, you must take into consideration a number of significant aspects regarding your audience. These factors fall into three main categories: demographic, situational and psychographic. Demographic factors include characteristics like age, gender, cultural background, education level and group membership. These basic attributes can provide initial insights into your audience's potential perspectives and preferences. For instance, different generations may have different communication styles, cultural references, or technological comfort levels. Educational background might influence vocabulary expectations and familiarity with certain concepts, but demographics should be used with caution. Although they can give good general information, they can also cause oversimplification or stereotyping if used too strictly. Keep in mind that each audience consists of individuals who might not fit general patterns characteristic of their demographic groups. Use demographic information as a point of departure for consideration, not as absolute conclusions about your particular audience. Situational factors emphasize the context of your communication. Audience size and location have a great bearing on how you ought to communicate. An informal small group leaves room for more interaction and closeness than an official large presentation. The physical setting, whether it's an intimate conference room, a big auditorium or a virtual platform, establishes different dynamics that influence the reception of your message. The disposition of the audience toward your subject matter is another key situational variable. Are they predisposed to be interested and informed, objective but open-minded, skeptical or even aggressive? These varied points of departure call for different strategies. A curious audience may appreciate detailed information and technical vocabulary, whereas a skeptical one may require more basic explanations and robust evidence. And again, the disposition of your audience toward you as a person influences their susceptibility. If they already know you and trust you, they will tend to grant you the benefit of the doubt. If you're a stranger to them, you'll have to build credibility. If there's preconceived skepticism concerning you as a person, you'll have to deal with that first before your message can be heard at all. The situation for the communication also determines expectations and proper strategies. A training session, a motivational speech, a decision-making session, and a ceremonial speech all require different tones, formats, and content emphases. Knowing the purpose of the event enables you to frame your message according to what the audience is looking for and wants from that specific communication event. Maybe most significant are psychographic considerations. The attitudes, beliefs, values, and motivations that influence how your audience thinks and what they are interested in. These internal forces tend to make the biggest difference in how your message is perceived, but can be the most difficult to guess from surface observations. Knowing what your audience already knows about your subject keeps you from explaining the obvious in patronizing terms, as well as from making confusing jumps that leave out essential background. Their current opinions or beliefs regarding your subject form the starting point from which they'll measure your message. If these prevailing views are not recognized and addressed, they can serve as obstacles to embracing new ideas. Your audience's underlying values and motives, what they really care about and why, offer the secret to developing messages that touch more deeply. As you bridge your message to these root values, you transcend intellectual assent to emotional involvement and commitment. Finally, understanding your audience's specific needs and interests related to your topic allows you to focus on what matters most to them. What are they attempting to solve? What do they aim to accomplish? What do they most need to know? Focusing on these particular issues makes your message instantly valuable and relevant. Collecting this audience information takes both direct and indirect approaches based on what is available and suitable for your circumstance. Direct approaches entail openly soliciting information via interviews, surveys, or discussions. On the eve of a planned presentation, you may discuss the anticipated composition and interests of the audience with the organizer. In case of regular communication with a well-defined audience, surveys can yield systematic information regarding their knowledge, interests, and requirements. Even casual talk with representative elements of your target audience can be useful. If direct approaches cannot or may not be enough, indirect approaches can compensate for them. Observation prior to, and concurrent with, your communication gives real-time feedback on the level of engagement and reaction of your audience. Body language, facial reactions, and attention levels all give instantaneous signals of what is and isn't working. Using educated guesswork based on demographics or group membership can be a place to start when exact information is unavailable. If you're writing to a professional organization, for example, you can safely assume certain common knowledge and interests from the nature of their field. The background research that you do on the organization or group you are writing to, checking their website, publications, or mission statement, can show you their priorities, values, and concerns. Lying beneath all these techniques is often the strongest weapon for understanding audiences: empathy. Empathy is really about making a sincere effort to view your subject from the audience's perspective, to move out of your own frame of reference and into theirs. This is not an intellectual exercise, but an emotional one, as it asks you to tap into how your audience is likely to feel about and react to your message. A very helpful empathetic question is, what's in it for them? Abbreviated frequently as YFM. This question requires you to say what the precise value or benefit your message is providing to this specific audience. If you cannot easily see what your listeners are going to benefit from listening to you, then you might have to rethink either your content or the way that you're presenting it. Once you've established information about your audience, adapting your message in light of this knowledge is the next step. This adaptation is carried out on various aspects of your communication, ranging from content selection, to language use, to style of delivery. Content adaptation starts with choosing appropriate main points and supporting material. Not all you know about your subject will be of equal significance or interest to all audiences. From your analysis of audience, rank the items that most specifically meet their needs, interests, and concerns. Select examples and evidence that will strike a chord with their experiences and values. The degree of detail and complexity must also be matched to your audience's level of knowledge and need for information. Excessive detail for a beginning audience leads to confusion and overload. Too little for an expert audience seems superficial and wastes their time. Similarly, complex concepts might need extensive explanation for some audiences, but just a brief mention for others who are already familiar with them. Focus particularly on benefits and outcomes relevant to your specific audience. Different audiences will care about different aspects of the same topic based on their roles, responsibilities, and priorities. A technical aspect that thrills engineers may be of little concern to executives who are more interested in business results. A pedagogical approach that is attractive to teachers for its soundness may have to be explained to parents in terms of how it will make their kids successful. Language adaptation is also necessary to connect with your audience. Use words that your audience can comprehend without undue effort. This does not imply dumbing down your message, but communicating it in language that is understandable to your specific audience. The aim is clarity and engagement, not showing off your vocabulary or technical expertise. When technical vocabulary is unavoidable, define them explicitly for audiences who are not familiar with them. For specialized audiences, proper technical terminology establishes your expertise and credibility. For general audiences, though, too much jargon presents obstacles to comprehension and can make you appear either ignorant of your audience's requirements or willfully exclusionary. Employ inclusive language that honors the diversity of your audience. Avoid terms that may exclude or marginalize particular groups unintentionally. This is not a matter of political correctness, but of effective communication. Slang that makes certain audience members feel left out or disrespected creates a barrier to your message's reception. The tone of your language should be appropriate to the occasion and audience expectations. Familiar conversational tones suit certain occasions, but sound unprofessional or unprepared in others. In contrast, extremely formal language might suit certain ceremonial events, but create an excessive distance in more cooperative situations. Aside from content and language, relating to your audience's interests and viewpoints create stronger connections. Make use of examples with which they can relate. An example that effectively demonstrates your argument but occurs in a framework with which your audience is unfamiliar will not carry the weight you aim. Tie your message to your audience's prior knowledge and values wherever you can. New information is better accepted and retained when it relates to what individuals already know and are interested in. These links form hooks that keep your message lodged in your audience's minds. When dealing with potentially polarizing subjects, be respectful of alternative viewpoints. You do not have to agree, but acknowledging that reasonable individuals may differ shows respect for your audience's intelligence and independence. This respect encourages them to consider your view seriously even if they disagree at first. Your presentation style must also change depending on audience considerations. Adjust your tone according to your audience's attitude toward your subject. An energetic, excited presentation may stimulate a pre-existingly interested audience but would come across as callous or off-putting in a doubting or worried one. Adjust your emotional tone to suit your material as well as your audience's probable state of mind. Also, adjust your level of interactivity according to audience size and format. A small number in an informal environment may embrace discussion, questioning, and involvement. A large audience in a formal setting may anticipate a more formal presentation with minimal interaction. Knowing these expectations allows you to design an experience that is both suitable and comfortable for your particular circumstances. Perhaps the most difficult part of audience-centered communication is connecting across differences, bridging gaps of culture, point of view or perspective. These encounters demand more awareness and adjustment. When speaking with culturally diverse groups, be aware that communication patterns differ considerably from culture to culture. Some cultures affirm directness and explicitness. Others favor more indirect contextual communication. Some affirm emotional expression. Others value restraint. Some foster questioning and debate. Others value harmony and consensus more. Knowing these differences allows you to accurately interpret responses and adapt your style accordingly. Look for common ground and shared values that go beyond cultural differences. Regardless of different backgrounds and outlooks, most individuals have some common basic concerns and hopes for security, respect, opportunity, connection, and meaning. Identifying these areas of commonality builds bridges that can cross considerable differences in particular viewpoints or experiences. Be aware of non-verbal differences, too. Eye contact, distance, body language, and other non-verbal cues have varying meanings in different cultures. Attentiveness in one culture may appear aggressive elsewhere. Respectfulness in one situation may appear evasiveness elsewhere. Being aware of these possible differences prevents you from misunderstanding others' cues or conveying unintended messages through your own non-verbal actions. In the event of disagreement or resistance, recognize opposing opinions respectfully instead of ignoring or brushing them aside. Validating concerns or different points of view shows that you're working with your audience's thought processes instead of attempting to override them. Such validation provides room for real consideration as opposed to defensive rejection of what you're saying. Emphasize common objectives or principles even when particular opinions vary. Most often, conflicts arise not about ultimate goals, but about the most effective ways to accomplish them. Emphasizing the shared goal when comparing various potential paths can minimize the sense of conflict and generate greater receptivity to other methods. Offer solid evidence and sound reasoning that speaks to your audience's particular concerns and questions. Various audiences are moved by different forms of evidence depending on their values, experience, and cognitive styles. Some are powerfully affected by data and statistics. Others are more persuaded by personal accounts. Some place importance on historical precedent. Others are concerned with new and creative thinking. Knowing what your specific audience will find compelling enables you to frame your argument most effectively. We will now practice these principles in exercises to enhance your audience analysis and adaptation abilities. Our first exercise involves crafting audience profiles. Select a subject that you are familiar with, maybe something from your line of work or an interest of yours. Now visualize delivering this subject to 3 very different groups. Maybe a high school group, a conference of industry professionals, and a community group. For each group, outline how you would tailor your presentation in terms of content, terminology, and style. What key points would you stress for each group? What are some examples that would be relevant to their experience? What is the right amount of technical terminology? What tone and style will engage them most? As you create these modifications, keep in mind the entire set of considerations we've explored. Demographic, situational, and psychographic. How could age, education level, or cultural background affect your strategy? What about the location and intent of the presentation? Most importantly, what would each audience already know, believe, and care about regarding your topic? This exercise develops your ability to think systematically about audience differences and to create targeted approaches rather than one-size-fits-all messages. The goal isn't to create 3 entirely different presentations, but rather to thoughtfully adapt a core message to connect effectively with different listeners. Our second exercise, the Jargon Buster, builds your ability to translate technical language into understandable terms. Get hold of a short piece of technical or specialized writing from your area of work or any specialized field with typical terminology. It could be an extract from a professional journal, a part of a technical handbook, or a piece of content from a specialist website. Rewrite this passage for a general audience, eliminating jargon and simplifying complex concepts without losing the essential meaning. Focus on clarity and everyday language while maintaining accuracy. The goal isn't to oversimplify or dumb down the content, but to make it accessible to someone without specialized knowledge in that area. This exercise builds awareness of how specialized language can create barriers to understanding for those outside a particular field. It refines your capability to engage complex thoughts in simple language. An useful skill for speaking to a variety of audiences or describing your knowledge to non-industry people. Our last exercise utilizes empathy mapping to create a deep awareness of the point of view of your audience. Select a particular topic and a specific audience. Develop an empathy map by wondering what this audience may be thinking, feeling, seeing, hearing, and living in connection with your subject. What would they be thinking about this topic? What would they be feeling? What additional information are they exposed to in their surroundings? What would be the frustrations or pains, difficulties that they would connect with this topic? What wants, benefits, or gains could they associate with it? This exercise extends beyond surface attributes to an in-depth comprehension of your audience's internal experience. It allows you to connect to their point of view emotionally and cognitively as well, making insights that can make your message more impactful and meaningful. When you're working through these exercises, keep in mind that audience analysis isn't about manipulating people, but about serving them more effectively. The goal is not to trick people into agreeing with you, but to present your message in ways that allow it to be genuinely heard, understood, and considered. Audience-centered communication is fundamentally about respect, recognizing that effective communication requires meeting people where they are rather than expecting them to come to you. This respect for your audience transforms not just how you communicate, but how your communication is received. When people feel understood and valued, when they sense that you've taken the time to consider their perspective and address their concerns, they're naturally more receptive to your message. They're more likely to engage actively, consider your ideas openly, and remember what you've shared. In doing so, understanding your people is not only a method of better communication. It's a method that builds more significant connections. It turns communication from a one-way information transmission into a mutual experience of comprehension. It acknowledges that at its core, communication is not about speakers and listeners, but about human beings relating to other human beings. In our next chapter, we will explore a level of communication that makes bare assertions powerful arguments. Past the task of knowing your audience is the challenge of persuading them, of delivering the content that lends authority and credibility to your words. This unspoken factor, much neglected in conversations about communication skill, can mean the difference between having your message embraced or rejected, believed or disbelieved. The distinction between being heard and being heeded quite often hinges on this key variable that we're going to reveal together. Chapter 6, Your Ideas. My view is that communication skills are the most critical determinant of success in the professional world. What was your response to that declaration? Did you at once accept it as accurate? Or did you catch yourself thinking, says who? Or prove it? Maybe you found yourself thinking, on what evidence? Or in relation to what else? If you stopped for a moment and questioned or doubted any of these, you've just experienced one of the most basic truths about successful communication. Claims in themselves are seldom convincing. Whether stated confidently or how self-evident the claim itself may be, the human mind instinctively looks for something more. It hungers for substance behind claims, facts behind assertions, evidence behind declarations. This natural skepticism, this innate need for support indicates an essential aspect of clear communication beyond the mechanics of clear speech, the music of vocal delivery, the architecture of structure, or even the accommodation to audience requirements. It suggests something more basic. The necessity of providing your ideas with weight, credibility, and impact through good supporting material. But what is supporting material, anyway? And why should it matter that much to your communication effectiveness? Essentially, supporting material is the proof, examples, explanations, and illustrations that underpin, explicate, and enhance your arguments. It's all that shifts your communication away from mere assertion to supported arguments. It's what makes the abstract concrete, the vague concrete, and the dubious credible. The distinction between unsupported assertions and soundly supported arguments is the distinction between saying trust me and providing people with good reasons to trust you. It's the distinction between demanding belief and earning conviction. And in a world where audiences are becoming more sophisticated, more skeptical, and more information overloaded, this distinction can mean the difference between your message being embraced or rejected, recalled or forgotten, acted on or disregarded. Think about how much more or less receptive you are likely to be to these two versions of essentially the same underlying message. Version 1, Important effective communication skills are essential to professional success. Version 2, Important effective communication skills are essential to professional success. A new survey of executives at Fortune 500 companies found that the number one criterion used in making promotion decisions was communications ability, outranking technical proficiency, work habits, or academic credentials. As one CEO explained, I can instruct technical skills, but I cannot instruct someone to speak clearly. This is a basic fact of working life. Ideas only matter when they can be communicated to others. The first version makes a plausible assertion, but gives no reason to believe it except for the implicit authority of the speaker. The second version backs up the same assertion with survey evidence, expert opinion, and explanatory argument. The disparity in persuasiveness is stark and instant. This shows the first and most basic reason why support is important. Claims are not persuasive by themselves. Claims without evidence do not alter attitudes or motivate action. Even when your audience leans toward agreeing with you, unsupported claims seem flimsy and ephemeral. When your listeners are skeptical or neutral, unsupported assertions are quick to dismiss. Supporting material presents the evidence which establishes belief. It shows your positions aren't just personal viewpoint, but that they're rooted in evidence, reason, or collective experience. Such evidence establishes an acceptance basis impossible for mere assertion to attain. This basis becomes particularly crucial in the face of skepticism or rival perspectives. In such situations, supporting material makes your message more resistant to challenges by preempting and resolving possible objections. It indicates that you've given the issue adequate thought and are not merely asserting preferences or untested assumptions. Apart from persuasion, supporting material has another vital role: clarification. Abstract concepts become tangible and comprehensible when explained with particular examples, analogies, or descriptions. Think of how much more clear the abstract idea of effective communication is when it is shown with real behaviors, techniques, or situations that illustrate what it looks like in real life. Support also serves to explain the importance or effect of your points. It's one thing to assert that an issue is serious. It's another to demonstrate its scale through statistics, its human cost through stories, or its implications through logical extension. Support material assists audiences not only in comprehending your points, but in appreciating why they are important. This explanatory role automatically increases engagement as well. Specific, concrete supporting information makes your message more compelling and memorable than abstract generalities alone. It gives the color, texture, and depth that attract and hold attention during your communication. Most of all, well-done supporting information greatly strengthens both your credibility and your message's recall. By adding in applicable research, expert advice, or good analysis, you show you are knowledgeable and well-prepared. That showing helps build trust in you as a source of information and understanding. Audiences will be more likely to accept your conclusions when they can see the solid foundation on which they're based. Supporting material also makes your points stickier and more memorable. Abstract principles or broad statements, while they evaporate readily from memory, are replaced by stronger mental impressions which linger longer with concrete examples, vivid descriptions, and significant statistics. When your audience is able to see your points through illustrative support, your points are rooted in memory instead of drifting away as soon as your words cease. Moreover, well-selected supporting material establishes rapport with your audience through familiar examples or stories. When individuals view their own experiences or issues mirrored in your support, they form a personal stake in your message. This connection transforms communication from a one-way transmission of information to a shared exploration of meaningful ideas. With these benefits in mind, let's explore the various types of supporting material available to you. The tools in your toolkit for building stronger, clearer, and more persuasive communication. Examples are perhaps the most versatile and accessible form of support. They put theoretical concepts into real life by demonstrating instead of merely stating. They turn broad guidelines into concrete examples that your audience can see and comprehend. Quick examples give instant images that make the point without diverting your overall flow. Good listening is manifest through nonverbal cues like nodding your head or eye contact. This simple illustration instantly makes what could otherwise be an abstract concept clear. Extended examples provide richer examples that enable richer explorations of an idea. They may be describing a particular scenario, procedure, or use in sufficient detail to form a full picture. Extended examples are especially valuable for difficult concepts that cannot be well represented in one or two sentences. Hypothetical examples pose hypothetical circumstances in order to establish principles or effects. Suppose you're speaking to senior managers when one throws your key assumption into doubt. Without anticipating objections, you may become flustered or defensive, which can destroy your credibility. These what-if situations enable audiences to imagine applications or implications they may not have thought of. Examples do several things at once. They explain by illustrating what you are saying. They make it personal by relating abstract concepts to human experience. And they reinforce by giving specific examples that illustrate your overall assertions. Their flexibility makes them a necessity in nearly any type of communication. Descriptions and stories extend the power of examples by creating vivid pictures that appeal to the senses and emotions. Good descriptions employ sensory details to create vivid images that audiences can visualize, hear, feel, or even taste and smell in their imaginations. This sensory appeal makes more lasting impressions than abstract descriptions alone. Storytelling is one of the strongest types of supporting material that can be used. Humans are inherently narrative animals. We narrate in our minds, recall in narratives, and empathize through narratives. Experiments time and time again reveal that data in narrative context are recalled much better than the same data as discrete facts. Successful stories usually have a general format of setup, establishing the circumstances and characters, conflict, posing a problem, challenge or tension, and resolution, indicating how the situation was resolved and what was learned. The format engenders natural interest as people are interested in knowing what happens next and what lessons are derived. Although examples and stories make ideas concrete, definitions provide common understanding of important terms and ideas. Technical jargon or terms usually need to be defined explicitly to prevent confusion or misinterpretation. Active listening, in my definition, means not only hearing words, but showing interest through questioning, paraphrasing, and responding appropriately. This definition makes it clear to everyone what the speaker intends by this term. Abstract ideas also gain from precise definition. Leadership, innovation, or effective communication are terms that can have varying meanings to various individuals. Stating these concepts clearly establishes a basis of agreement for the ensuing discussion. Definitions may come in the form of dictionaries, giving formal definitions by authoritative sources. Specialized definitions borrow expertise from established authorities within a discipline. Operational definitions describe concepts in relation to observable behavior or measurable criteria. Etymological definitions delve into the origin and history of words to shed light on their essential meanings. Analogies and comparisons fill gaps between the familiar and the unknown by relating the unfamiliar to the familiar. Analogies and comparisons assist audiences in comprehending novel ideas by linking them to current knowledge. Figurative analogies, similes and metaphors to like things to produce understanding. A good structured speech is akin to a journey with sound signposts. It takes listeners from one place to another without ambiguity. The reference assists audiences in comprehending the role of structure by comparing it to the familiar activity of walking on a path. Literal analogies compare comparable processes or things to describe one in relation to the other. The process of communication is akin to mailing and reading a package. The sender has to package the message well, select a proper method of delivery, and deliver it to the correct address. The recipient has to open it cautiously and read the contents as meant. This analogy serves to describe communication by making it analogous to the same but tangible process. Good analogies cause moments of comprehension, but be careful in picking them so they are not vague or deceptive. The contrast should shed light and not be confusing, and the similarities between the points that are relevant for your argument have to be greater than the dissimilarities. Statistics present numeric evidence that may measure your points, illustrating size, frequency, or trends. Figures can bring detail and authority to assertions that might otherwise be hazy or unfounded. More than 70% of hiring managers list communication skills as their first choice when screening applicants. This figure turns a general assertion about the value of communication into a concrete measurable fact, but raw numbers often fail to communicate by themselves. To make statistics work requires techniques such as rounding off complicated numbers, referring to numbers in terms of something familiar, and placing facts in context in order to illustrate their importance. The average individual makes more than 30,000 choices every day. That's one choice for every 2 seconds of your conscious life. This context makes the size easier to appreciate than if left as the sheer number. The credibility of statistical support depends on using reliable sources and presenting data accurately. Misrepresented or cherry-picked statistics can undermine your credibility if discovered. Equally important is connecting statistics to your audience's lives to make them meaningful. Abstract numbers become powerful when audiences understand their implications for things they care about. Opinions and testimony leverage the expertise or experience of others to support your points. Expert testimony accesses the information of acknowledged experts in the relevant domain. In accordance with Dr. Maya Richards, a distinguished researcher in organizational psychology, the quality of team communication is the best indication of team performance. Such testimony strengthens communication importance claims with the authority of the expert source. Lay testimony conveys the experiences or views of average individuals, including yourself, as appropriate. Although not bearing the same weight as professional opinions, these opinions have the ability to be influential since they're real and understandable. They illustrate how ideas or principles are applied in real life and can establish deep emotional resonance. Any testimonial's potential to persuade relies, to a great extent, on the perceived credibility of the source. This trustworthiness is derived from such factors as expertise, experience and knowledge in the area of the topic, trustworthiness, perceived honesty and ethical standing, and currency, current knowledge in fast-moving areas. With this set of supporting materials available to you, the next hurdle is choosing and assessing which kinds to employ in given circumstances. Choosing is based on a number of important criteria. Relevance is possibly the most basic issue. Does your supporting information bear a direct relation to and make your point stronger? Even the most fascinating example or intriguing statistic becomes a distraction if it doesn't clearly reinforce your particular point or further your general message. Credibility has to do with the trustworthiness and dependability of your supporting information. Are your sources trustworthy? Is your data based on sound research? Are your examples true depictions and not outliers or inflationary? Audiences will ask questions about your conclusions if they question the basis upon which they're formed. Recency is especially important for issues that change rapidly. Data that was true 5 years ago might no longer be true in areas such as technology, medicine, or business practices. Utilizing up-to-date information shows that your knowledge is current and applicable to current conditions. Interest is a pragmatic concern that impacts involvement. Will this specific supporting material engage and sustain audience interest? The most applicable and authentic support still falls short if it's delivered in a dry, technical, or too complicated way that loses your audience's interest. Audience appropriateness brings us back to the guidelines of Chapter 5, Understanding Your People. Is your supporting content appropriate for the particular knowledge level, values, and interests of your audience? Technical information can be ideal for experts but garbled for broader audiences. Details from one's own cultural tradition may not transfer well to multiculturally heterogeneous audiences. Finally, diversity of your supporting material makes your message more interesting and complete. With only one kind of support, only statistics, only examples, or only expert opinions, you put a limitation on the persuasive appeal and also on the level of interest of your communication. Supports are different from each other, but they support each other to cover both logical and emotional aspects of understanding and belief. Having chosen proper supporting material, now the task is how to integrate it well and ethically into your communication. This transition starts with explicitly marking when you're bringing in evidence or examples. Transition words such as, for instance, according to, research indicates, or envision, signal listeners that you're shifting from assertions to backing, allowing them to put what they're hearing into a mental category. These lead-in words act as landmarks directing audience comprehension. For example, signals an example is on its way. Indicates you're going to present information from a source. Shows prepares the audience for information or results. Imagine evokes a hypothetical situation. These verbal signals generate clarity regarding the kind and reason for the supporting material you're using. As vital as describing the relationship between your support and the point it's intended to establish. Never presume that audiences will naturally perceive why a given example, statistic, or comparison is relevant to your argument. Spell out these connections. This statistic is significant because it illustrates not only that communication influences success, but that it surpasses variables traditionally deemed most crucial. This explanatory connection elevates supporting material from mere fact to compelling evidence. It answers the implicit so what question that arises whenever new information is presented. Without this connection, even the most compelling support can seem like an interesting but ultimately irrelevant detour from your main message. Ethical integration also requires appropriate acknowledgement of sources when you're using others' ideas, research, or words. This acknowledgement serves multiple purposes. It gives credit where it's due. It enhances your credibility by showing research and preparation. And it allows audiences to evaluate the reliability of your sources. In formal written communication, this acknowledgement typically takes the form of citations and references. In spoken communication, verbal attribution is more appropriate. According to a recent article in Harvard Business Review, as communication expert Breen Brown explains or research from MIT's Media Lab demonstrates, These attributions can be brief while still providing essential context about the source of your information. This ethical acknowledgement is not merely a formality, but a fundamental aspect of intellectual honesty. Presenting others' ideas as your own constitutes plagiarism, a serious breach of communication ethics that can severely damage your credibility if discovered. Even if your audience may not be aware of the original source, being truthful in your application of supporting material is key to your becoming an ethical communicator. Now, let's apply these principles to practice with exercises to build your ability to identify, choose, and incorporate effective supporting material. Our first exercise is on brainstorming several kinds of support for a straightforward claim. Pick a simple claim such as good communication enhances company productivity or second language learning enriches the brain. For your claim, brainstorm at least 3 various kinds of supporting evidence that you might utilize. Maybe a statistic, an example, and an analogy. For each form of support, think about what would be most persuasive or illuminating for your use. A figure may express the size of the advantage. A demonstration may show how the principle applies in reality. An analogy may assist audiences in comprehending the underlying process or mechanism. The aim is to build flexibility in creating various types of support that play various roles in reinforcing your message. Our second exercise exercises the seamless incorporation of supporting material into your descriptions. Select one of your key points and one of your pieces of supporting material from exercise 1. Write a brief paragraph that sets out the point, sets out the support, states it clearly and then makes it very clear how it relates back to and reinforces your key point. Pay special attention to making clear lead-ins to signal the kind of support you are introducing and explanatory links to make its relevance clear. The move into the supporting material ought to be smooth rather than jarring, and the return to your overall point should be clear. This exercise gives practice to the verbal bridges that turn discrete bits of information into cogent, compelling arguments. Our last exercise assists in pinpointing areas of your own communication that would be helped by more robust support. Read a piece of your writing or a presentation plan you've prepared. Check especially for claims or points made without adequate supporting evidence. Where may audiences challenge your claims or find abstract ideas unclear? Where can concrete examples, pertinent statistics, or explanatory definitions help reinforce your message? Put yourself in your audience's shoes. Where might they have questions or need more convincing? What might seem obvious to you but require explanation for them? What abstract terms or complex ideas might benefit from illustration? This audience-centered review helps identify gaps in your support that might not be apparent from your own perspective. As you go through these exercises, keep in mind that effective support for your ideas is not about burying people under information. It's about giving the right support in the right quantity in the right manner to make your message clear, credible, and compelling. Occasionally, a single well-selected example will do more for you than several statistics. In some cases, a variety of support types all working together will provide the best ground for your message. The aim is communication that will feel substantial rather than superficial, earthed rather than random, and vivid rather than fuzzy. When you establish your arguments well, you don't merely state things, you construct cases. You don't merely express views, you offer insights. You don't merely pass on information, you establish understanding. This shift from simple assertion to well-supported argument is what lends your words real authority. It's what allows you to not merely be heard, but to be believed. Not merely to inform, but to influence. Not only to talk, but to convince. In a world filled with unsubstantiated assertions and unfounded opinions, the skill of making solid support for your thoughts stand out as a good communicator and someone with credibility. The rules and methods discussed in this chapter form the basis of communication with substance and effect. By stepping out of assertions to substantiated argumentation, you display respect for the intelligence and judgment of your readers. You are demonstrating a commitment to evidence and logic above bare assertion. And you develop communications that touch minds, yes, but change them. With our next chapter, we turn to an aspect of communication which serves to set even the simply competent apart from the truly superb. While most communicators concentrate on what to say, masters of articulation recognize that what not to say can be as important. This opposite of intuitive principle, this behind-the-scenes variable that goes against our innate impulse, can turn verbose rambling communication into laser-sharp impact. The distinction between feeling tuned out and being actually heard usually depends upon this one component that we are going to find out together. Chapter 7, Communicate Briefly. Two executives approached the board to share their visions for strategy. The first gave a 45-minute talk that addressed every nuance of his plan in full detail. His talk was extensive, detailed, and meticulous. As he finished speaking, the room remained quiet. A board member looked at her watch. The other stifled a yawn. The CEO suggested, "Might you please brief your point for me?" The second executive got behind the microphone. "Our business has three key challenges," she started. "Shrinking market share, escalating production costs, and mounting competition from online platforms. I suggest we tackle these by focusing investment in automation, selective partnership with technology disruptors, and transitioning to subscription-based revenue streams. My team has worked through each strategy and expects a 15% improvement in profitability over 18 months. I invite your questions on any part of this plan." She had been speaking for only less than 2 minutes. The room immediately responded, asking direct questions and plunging into substantial discussion. Her lucidity had an instant effect. Her brevity triggered instant response. Her conciseness transmitted assurance and authority. What distinguished these two presentations wasn't knowledge, experience, or even material. Both executives knew their topics inside and out. Both possessed worthwhile insights to impart. The key distinction was in their communication style. Precisely, in their relationship with a quality that has become ever more uncommon and ever more precious in our information-rich environment. This quality, this style of communication that has the power to take rambling descriptions and turn them into razor-sharp observations, is what we'll examine in this chapter. It's a level of articulate speech that transcends clear enunciation, vocal variety, logical organization, audience accommodation, or even good supporting arguments. It deals not with what you say or the way you say it, but with how much you say, and more significantly, how much you do not say. But what does it actually mean to communicate succinctly? And why has this specific skill become so essential in present-day communication? At its essence, concise communication is conveying ideas in as few words as possible to convey meaning and effect. It's communicating your message without extraneous elaboration, side trips, or word padding. It's the skill of saying precisely what must be said. No more, no less. It doesn't imply speaking in staccato, truncated bits, or stripping away all context and subtlety. Instead, it involves being thoughtful in every word you say, so that each word is used with a specific purpose for taking your message forward. It involves an awareness that words are precious money and using them judiciously. With the current era of information overload, this kind of communication has become not only desirable but necessary. We have an age of record competition for attention. Each day, the typical individual is exposed to thousands of messages on numerous channels, emails, social media, news, advertising, conversations, presentations, and so on. This constant bombardment has fundamentally altered the way in which individuals deal with information. Attention spans have not so much decreased as is oftentimes alleged, but attention is more selective. Individuals have evolved intelligent filters to rapidly decide what of their limited mental capacity is worthy of it. Words that come across as wordy, rambling, and unfocused are the ones first eliminated. Those that provide value quickly and concisely are the ones that get through. In this environment, conciseness becomes a form of respect for your audience's time and attention. It acknowledges that these resources are precious and limited. When you communicate concisely, you signal that you value your listeners' time as much as your own. You demonstrate that you've done the work of distilling your thoughts rather than expecting your audience to do it for you. This respect creates immediate goodwill. Before your audience even has a chance to process your content, they notice that you're not wasting their time. A discovery that makes them more open to your message. On the other hand, when you ramble or add extraneous details, you establish an implicit disrespect that can destroy even the most valuable content. Aside from demonstrating respect, conciseness allows your message to penetrate the noise of information overload. When everyone else is wordy, brevity is notable. A well-focused message has a much higher chance of being seen, heard, and recalled than one hidden amidst too many words. In an age where attention is the rarest commodity, brevity provides your ideas with the best opportunity to be heard. Such impact is amplified by the transparency that brevity creates. Words that do not contribute do not merely waste time. They actually cloud your core message. They're like mist that's around your key points, obscuring them. When you cut this word fog, your key points are clear-cut in contrast, right out there in the open and easy to find for your audience. Consider the following. If you were walking to meet someone significant in a crowded space, would you want a clear route or a route filled with obstructions? Excess words are obstructions that your audience has to wade through to find your meaning. Eliminate these barriers and you provide a direct route to comprehension. This directness also benefits memory. Studies repeatedly demonstrate that clear, direct messages are more memorable than wordy ones. The human brain can only process so much information in working memory at a time. When you communicate important ideas directly and simply without filling them with extraneous information, you make them far more likely to be remembered. Conciseness also reflects confidence and concentration. When you write or speak concisely, you convey mastery of your topic. You indicate that you've considered your subject deeply enough to boil it down to its fundamentals. This seeming control engenders confidence in your knowledge and judgment. Think about how we automatically respond to someone who takes 10 words when 3 will do, or someone who makes the same point over and over again in almost different ways. We tend to see such communication as tentative, unstructured, or unconvincing. In contrast, clear direct communication implies clear thinking and purpose, values we instinctively link with leadership and control. Let it be remembered, however, that to be concise is not to be curt. To be concise is not to be brusque, rude, or abrupt in your communication. It doesn't mean you have to sacrifice needed background, forgo politeness, or exclude all personality and warmth. Efficiency is the objective, not coldness. Authentic brevity sustains all elements required to promote effective communication such as fitting context, relating to language, and adequate detail to comprehend. It merely drops out all nonspecific purposefulness. It is more about being thrifty with words, rather than being miserly with connection and information. Being able to manage this balancing act involves planning along the way ahead of time and not attempting to cut to the chase based on meandering thinking afterwards. This planning starts with establishing your key message. The one most essential thing your audience must know or do because of your message. Any effective message has a core, an essence or purpose around which all else hinges. Establishing this core is the initial and most fundamental step toward brevity. Ask yourself, if my audience were to recall just one thing from this message, what should that be? Your response then becomes the guiding point that determines all other choices regarding content and organization. Your core message must be reducible to a single sentence that clearly states it. If you can't make your primary point this clear, you might not have adequately worked through your own thinking yet. The act of creating a clear purpose statement makes you get clear yourself before you try to create it for others. Once established, this central message is a great filter for selecting content. For each item of information you think about including, ask, does this directly support or further my central message? If not, it's a candidate for deletion no matter how interesting or valuable it may be in some other context. This process of filtering necessitates a fundamental change of thinking from what you need to say to what your audience must hear. We instinctively come at communication from our own perspective, considering all the things we know or are interested in about a subject. Conciseness necessitates a flip of this thinking to be obsessed with audience needs. Rather than asking, what do I want to say, this audience-based approach automatically weeding out much of the excess that makes communication wordy and unfocused. It privileges key information over fascinating but extraneous details, building a message that is on behalf of your listeners instead of catering to your own interests. Some of this information focus is also about answering questions ahead of time by answering people directly. Rather than trying to cover every possible aspect of a topic, which leads to verbosity, identify the specific questions your audience is likely to have about your core message and address those explicitly. This targeted approach ensures you include necessary information while avoiding unnecessary tangents. Structure also plays a crucial role in concise communication. A well-defined, logical organization, as Chapter 4 discusses, automatically avoids rambling by giving your ideas a clear path to take. When you have a precise destination and a clear idea of how you'll arrive, you're far less likely to stray into unwanted side trips. This organization should get to the point in a hurry, particularly in the introduction. Though it's seductive to lead into your key idea gradually, this method can alienate your audience before you make your point. In most situations, asserting your essential message at the beginning establishes prompt relevance and allows listeners to organize ensuing information. Each argument in your structure should serve to reinforce your essential message. If you can't concisely explain how a given point furthers your central purpose, it may be superfluous no matter how intriguing or vital it appears on its own. This restraint of linking each item to your core makes natural brevity by removing anything that isn't directly helpful to your purpose. Having your message structured for brevity, the second step is pairing your words, stripping away the verbal baggage that takes up space without contributing to meaning. The exercise starts with recognizing and excising duplicate words and phrases that express the same idea twice. We are laden with redundancies that we use as second nature. Fundamentals, basics, sophisticated planning, sum total, past history, future plans, completely remove, unexpected surprise. In every instance, one term has both meanings. Basics are elementary by definition. Planning is always in advance. History is always past. Getting rid of these redundancies makes your language more concise without sacrificing any sense. Aside from glaring redundancies, avoid repeating ideas in various words. To repeat the same thing in variously phrased words does not drive your point home. It waters it down. Tell things once and well, and have confidence that your listeners got you the first time around. Another verbal litter is the weak qualifier and hedge words, terms and expressions that weaken the power of your statement. Phrases such as sort of, kind of, basically, I think, perhaps, in my opinion, and it seems like give your communication a tentative, unsure quality. Although fine when there really is uncertainty, these qualifiers habitually creep into our speech as mannerisms instead of deliberate statements of doubt. Conviction in speech is not the same as making unsubstantiated assertions or denying all shades of meaning. It means speaking your thoughts clearly and with confidence when you have grounds to do so. If you have conducted your research and reached a well-supported conclusion, express it outright instead of hedging unnecessarily. Your audience will appreciate your straightforwardness and see you as more credible and authoritative. Word choice also plays an important role in conciseness. Most communicators use long, complicated words unconsciously when shorter, more direct ones would be clearer. Compare utilize to use, demonstrate to show, terminate to end, endeavor to try or commence to begin. In both instances, the shorter word is not only shorter, but also more accessible and usually more effective. This use of simplicity is not about dumbing down your message. It's about impact and clarity. Even highly educated listeners enjoy clear, straightforward language. Fancier words seldom impress. It distances and muddles more frequently. As the saying goes, if you can't explain it in simple terms, you don't understand it well enough. Technical jargon and specialized terms should be deployed sparingly even to knowledgeable crowds. While precision requires some technical terms, lots of jargon tends to tell more about membership in a group than about meaning. Ask each specialized term if it really provides precision or adds complexity. A second candidate for trimming is redundant phrases that may be substituted with individual words. Phrases such as, on account of the fact that, because, in the event that, in case, in order to, for the sake of, for, at this moment in time, now, and in the near future, soon, tack on words without tacking on meaning. Substituting these phrases with their one-word substitutes achieves instant brevity without compromising clarity. Likewise, employing strong verbs rather than noun forms with helping verbs makes your language much tighter. Compare make a decision to decide, perform an analysis to analyze, conduct an investigation to investigate, or provide assistance to help. The active and passive voice choice also influences conciseness. Active voice is usually more concise, using fewer words to express the same thing. The subject performs the action in active voice. She wrote the report. The subject receives the action in passive voice. The report was written by her. Active voice is usually more concise, employing fewer words to express the same thing. It also provides greater clarity regarding who is doing what, which is usually important to know. Although passive voice has its place, such as when the actor is unknown, irrelevant, or better positioned at the end of the sentence for emphasis, it's too commonly used in professional and academic writing. Its overuse leads to wordiness and can cloud responsibility or agency. Preferring active voice in most cases naturally produces more concise and clear communication. Even with careful planning and linguistic attention, most first drafts include unnecessary words and phrases. Editing for conciseness is thus an important final step in the process. This editing starts with reading your message out loud, which makes wordiness and awkward phrasing that may not be evident when reading silently obvious. When we read quietly, our brains can gloss over unnecessary words or mentally simplify complicated sentences. Reading out loud obliges us to work through each word, and redundancies and unnecessarily complicated structures become immediately apparent. If you're gasping for breath before you make it through a sentence, or if phrases sound clumsy to say, they are definite signs that you need to edit. A really good editing approach is the cut it in half challenge. Copy a paragraph or part of your message and dare yourself to communicate the same point in half as many words. This limitation encourages you to spot what's actually important and lose everything else. You may never actually cut right down the middle, but this exercise nearly always brings out plenty of opportunities to make your words more concise. This exercise is effective because it compels prioritization. When you have to cut in half your words, you automatically prioritize keeping the most critical aspects of your message. This exercise tends to uncover that much of what you originally included was unnecessary to convey your main point. Other people's feedback offers another good opinion on your message's clarity and brevity. We tend to be too close to our own words to notice where we can simplify. Have respected colleagues or friends review your message and ask if it's clear and concise. Have them mark down any sections where they lost their train of thought, got confused, or found themselves daydreaming. This feedback can be particularly valuable for identifying places where you've assumed knowledge your audience might not have, or included details that interest you but don't advance your main point. External perspective helps ensure that your conciseness doesn't come at the expense of necessary context or explanation. Now, let's see these rules applied with exercises to improve your own skills in concise communication. Our first exercise is the word audit challenge. Take a recent report section or a transcript of yourself speaking. Read it sentence by sentence and mark every word or phrase which might be cut out without losing any sense. Be merciless in this audit. Challenge each word to earn its keep. Pay especial attention to the usual causes of wordiness we've gone over. Redundancy, vague qualifiers, overly complicated words, wordy phrases, and passive verbals. Also keep an eye out for whole sentences that, although maybe engaging or well written, do not contribute directly to the primary point of communication. Once you've pointed out all possible cuts, eliminate them and read the leaner edition. Does it hold the same necessary meaning? Does it really make itself clearer with less? As a rule, you'll notice that the tightened version is shorter, but not only that, it's also more forceful and concise. We're going to practice shortening individual sentences with our second exercise. Locate or write out several long, cumbersome sentences from your business or private communication, and then rewrite each one as concisely and directly as you can without changing the underlying sense. Pay special attention to substituting weak verb phrases with strong verbs, avoiding unnecessary prepositional phrases, and rephrasing passive constructions into active ones. Search for ways to divide extremely long sentences into two shorter ones if that produces more clarity. For instance, you can convert. A decision was reached by the committee after extensive deliberation that the deployment of the new policy would be done in a phased manner because full deployment immediately was considered to pose undue risk into. After considering, the committee concluded that phased implementation of the new policy would minimize risk. Our last exercise asks you to write an elevator pitch, a 30-second summary of a difficult concept. Select a project you're currently working on, a book you've read, or a concept you know well. Develop a brief description that conveys the central idea clearly and interestingly in approximately 75 to 100 words. This exercise requires extreme prioritization, determining what's absolutely critical about your subject and leaving everything else out. It builds the useful skill of boiling down difficult concepts to their core without reducing them to simplistic terms. Practice timing yourself to make sure your explanation is within the 30-second limit. As you go through these exercises, keep in mind that building conciseness is a process. Most of us tend by nature to be wordy, particularly when we are writing about something we know well or care about deeply. Conciseness takes effort and practice to overcome these natural tendencies. The ideal is not absolute brevity in all cases, but rather deliberate choice regarding how many words you use and why. At times, a longer explanation is truly necessary for clarity or persuasion. The secret is that each word is put to purpose rather than using extra due to habit or not having edited. The advantages of becoming a master of concise communication go far beyond just being efficient. In business, conciseness is more and more linked to executive presence and leadership. Executives and leaders are called upon to simplify and speak clearly and specifically. They are seen as more authoritative and decisive, by their nature, if they can boil down complicated situations to the essentials and communicate clear instructions. Conciseness also generates more impact for your most critical messages. When you're using words sparingly in most cases, the times when you do go on at longer length resonate more. Your audience understands that if you're expending more time on a specific subject, it has to be particularly meaningful or complicated. This contrast generates organic emphasis that will be lost if all of your communication is about the same length. Most of all, perhaps, brevity allows room for discussion and interaction. If you don't fill all available time or space with your own words, you have room for questions, debate, and true exchange of thoughts. This space makes communication into a shared exploration, often the most precious type of interaction. The art of saying more with less, of making every word count, is a hallmark of truly articulate communication. It demonstrates respect for your audience, clarity in your thinking, and confidence in your message. In a world increasingly overwhelmed by words, the ability to communicate concisely isn't just a skill, it's a significant competitive advantage. In our next chapter, we will explore a level of communication that turns information into actual connection. Past clarity and structure and concision is a quality that will make or break whether your message just reaches people or really resonates with them. This elusive ingredient, too frequently omitted from lists of communication skills, can turn the most mundane message into a lasting experience. The distinction between being processed and being embraced usually comes down to this one factor that we'll discover together. Chapter 8: Engage and Connect. What is the distinction between a message that merely reaches your audience and one that actually moves them? Between words that are processed and instantly forgotten and those that stay in the mind for days or even years? Between information transmission communication and understanding transformation communication? The solution is in a level of communication beyond technique, structure, and even content itself. It's a factor so strong that it can raise even mundane messages to extraordinary effect. But it's also elusive, too easily ignored in discussions of communication competence in favor of more concrete, learnable elements. This unknown element, this catalyst which takes words to make them count, is the focus of discussion in this chapter. It is the distinction between communicating to and communicating with people, between hearing and feeling you, between enlightening and influencing. But just what is that factor? Just what does it take to speak and be listened to by and to connect and reach the very people you are trying to convey to? And how do you build this ability in your own communication? The solutions start with recognizing that good communication is never simply a matter of passing information from one mind to another. It's about building an experience that speaks to your audience on several levels. Intellectual, yes, but also emotional, practical, and even aspirational. It's about transcending the passing of facts to the making of meaning. Reflect on the communications that have had the greatest influence on your own life. The speeches, conversations, books, or presentations that shifted the way you think, feel, or behave. What was it about them that made them so effective? Odds are, they didn't simply tell you something, they engaged you. They didn't simply offer ideas, they tied those ideas to something you care about. They evoked something from you, caused you to think differently, or see the world differently. This is the essence of engagement, moving beyond passive reception to active participation in the communication process. When audiences are truly engaged, they're not just hearing your words, they're mentally interacting with your ideas. They're asking questions, making connections, visualizing concepts, and relating information to their own experiences. Their minds are fully present and actively involved in creating meaning from your message. Creating this level of engagement begins with capturing and holding attention. In today's distraction-rich environment, attention has become perhaps the scarcest resource. The human mind is bombarded with stimuli and information from countless sources, creating a natural filtering mechanism that screens out anything that doesn't immediately register as important or interesting. Breaking through this filter requires deliberate strategies that signal to your audience. This matters to you. This is worth your precious attention. But getting attention is only the first step. Real engagement produces an intellectual and emotional bond that makes your message personally relevant to your audience. This bond converts communication from a one-way broadcast to a common experience. One that speaks to your listeners' values, experiences, needs and aspirations. Why does it make such a big difference? Because engagement inherently alters the way your message is received, processed, and remembered. When individuals are actively engaged with your communication, their comprehension increases. They process information more deeply, relate it to what they already know, and remember it more correctly and for longer times. Research again and again indicates that active processing of material considerably increases understanding and retention over passive reception. Engagement also dramatically increases your persuasiveness and influence. People are far more likely to be convinced by messages they've actively processed and connected with than by those they've merely heard. When your audience is engaged, they're more likely to consider your perspective, accept your arguments, and act on your recommendations. Beyond these practical benefits, engagement builds rapport and stronger relationships. When individuals sense that you've made a real connection, that you get and value them, they build more trust in you as a communicator. This trust carries over beyond the particular message to increase your general credibility and rapport with your audience. Maybe most basically, engagement makes the experience of communication more enjoyable and fulfilling for all parties. Engaged audiences are stimulated, interested, and respected instead of bored, confused, or manipulated. And as a communicator, to be able to connect with an engaged audience is 1,000 times more rewarding than to communicate with a disengaged one. This shared satisfaction builds positive feedback loops that increase all subsequent interactions. So how do you establish this strong engagement from the outset of your communication? Those initial moments are vital. Studies indicate that audiences make initial judgments in seconds and that these judgments powerfully determine how they react to everything else that follows. A strong start doesn't simply grab attention, it sets the tone, establishes expectations, and creates the setting for the relationship you seek to develop. Strong openings, as we discussed in Chapter 4, establish instant engagement by engaging your audience with something surprising, interesting, or immediately relevant to their interests. Curiosity-provoking questions, surprising statistics, narratives that invite listeners in, or quotes that stimulate thought, all can be good hooks that cut through initial disinterest and establish instant mental engagement. In addition to these traditional methods, generating intrigue from surprise can be especially effective. The human mind is inherently drawn to novelty and surprise. By introducing something that violates expectations in a relevant manner, you generate an instant mental engagement as the brain endeavors to process and incorporate this surprising information. This may mean beginning with a surprising declaration that defies conventional wisdom. Public speaking is all wrong. It might mean presenting an enigma or puzzle that elicits instant intrigue. There's one key thing that makes successful negotiations more than all the other things put together, and it is not what you would imagine. Or it might be taking an unconventional route on a common issue that causes listeners to perceive it differently. The secret is that the surprise element has to be pertinent to your message, not just random or shocking. It needs to make a productive disturbance that opens up the mind to new ideas instead of just confusing or bewildering your audience. When properly employed, this approach generates an instant buy-in that automatically has audiences wanting to know more. Of similar urgency is putting your message directly pertinent by making something in it for them. Folks instinctively listen to the information that will impact their own lives, create solutions for problems they are confronting, or progress toward objectives of their own. By establishing linkage between your subject and what their needs or passions are immediately upon starting out, you develop a personal stake with them instantly. This link responds to the unstated question in each member of your audience's mind. Why should I care about this? When you establish the benefits or applicability up front, you provide your audience with a good reason to commit their attention to what comes next. This is not manipulative. It's respectful, recognizing that people's time and attention are valuable and demonstrating to them why your message is worth those investments. After you've gained initial attention, the battle is to hold interest throughout your message. That's where most otherwise well-written messages fall down. They begin well, but slowly lose the audience as attention flags and minds drift. Maintaining attention demands a different skill set that continuously renews interest and deepens connection. The most effective of these strategies might be storytelling. Humans are wired for narrative. Our brains are wired to comprehend, recall, and relate through stories in ways that other information just can't compete. From the earliest age, stories are how we interpret the world, recall key lessons, and relate to others. This profound neurological connection to narrative makes storytelling an unmatched tool for building and sustaining engagement. When you narrate a story, either a short anecdote or a long piece of narrative, you engage areas of your listener's brain that would otherwise lie idle in pure fact communication. Studies with fMRI scans indicate that when we are listening to plain facts, only the language processing centers of our brain light up. However, when we listen to a story, the sensory cortex, motor cortex and other locations highlight as if we are witnessing events ourselves. This mirroring in the brain delivers a far richer, more engaging experience that naturally sustains attention and retrieves memory. Successful stories often observe a simple form. Setup, establishing the setting and characters. Conflict, presenting a challenge, problem or tension. And resolution, showing how the situation was resolved and what was learned. This structure creates natural engagement as audiences want to see how the conflict is resolved. It also provides a framework for delivering your message in a way that feels natural rather than forced. The power of storytelling extends beyond engagement to significantly enhance retention. Studies consistently show that information embedded in narrative form is remembered far better than the same information presented as isolated facts. This story advantage in memory makes narrative one of your most powerful tools for creating messages that not only engage in the moment, but continue to influence long after they're delivered. Complementing storytelling is the use of vivid, specific language that creates word pictures in your audience's mind. Abstract, generic language produces fuzzy, unremembered impressions. Specific, concrete language forms vivid mental pictures that engage the imagination and linger in memory. Compare, the presentation was good to the presentation captivated the room, eliciting gasps when the shocking results flashed up on screen and inspiring a 30-minute debate which spilled out into the corridor afterwards. The second version doesn't merely say the presentation was good. It demonstrates to you what that effectiveness actually looked like in concrete visual terms. It conjures up a picture that's much more compelling and memorable than the abstraction. This concreteness comes from breaking out of abstract language to sensory details. What did it look, sound, feel, smell or taste like? These sensory details produce a richer, more vivid experience that naturally holds attention and leaves stronger memory traces. They turn your words from symbols on a page or air sounds to occurrences in your listener's mind. Strong specific language also depends on strong verbs and exact nouns as opposed to vague general terms supported by adjectives and adverbs. Consider, she walked slowly to she trudged or she shuffled. The specific verbs bring direct clear pictures that general terms with modifiers cannot equal. Likewise, the politician delivered a terrible speech is a weaker image than the politician struggled through his speech, losing his place time and again and refuting his own arguments. Figurative language, metaphors, similes, and analogies contributes another level of vividness by establishing relationships between unlike things that shed light on meaning. Her case was a house of cards, impressive at first sight but disintegrating under the least pressure. This comparison creates an immediate visual understanding that her argument was weak, simply doesn't achieve. These figures of speech engage the imagination and create memorable associations that help your message stick. Beyond language choice, incorporating variety in multiple dimensions of your communication helps maintain engagement by continuously refreshing attention. Varying your vocal delivery, as we explored in Chapter 3, prevents the monotony that leads to tuning out. Switching between various kinds of supporting material, examples, statistics, anecdotes, expert opinions, produces textural variety that makes your message feel fresh and engaging. Even varying sentence length and structure produces subtle but significant engagement effects. A string of sentences with the same structure provides a monotonous rhythm that induces the brain into lethargy. Alternating between short, punchy sentences and longer, more involved ones provides a verbal rhythm that keeps one interested. Especially if you use the short sentences to highlight important points following longer descriptive passages. The contrast naturally adds emphasis and revitalizes attention. Proper humor, applied sparingly and with consideration of your audience, can also be an effective engagement tool. Humor creates positive emotional states that enhance receptivity to your message. It builds rapport by creating shared positive experiences, and it provides mental breaks that actually enhance attention to the serious content that surrounds it. The key is ensuring that humor is appropriate to the context, aligned with your message rather than distracting from it, and tailored to your specific audience's sensibilities. Questions are another effective engagement technique, encouraging active consideration rather than passive reception. Rhetorical questions encourage your audience to think through the answer in their minds, establishing instant cognitive engagement with your subject matter. What if each member of your team spoke with total clarity? This question encourages listeners naturally to visualize and consider this situation, inviting them more fully into engagement than a straightforward assertion of the value of clear communication. In interactive environments, questions that prompt verbal answers establish even greater involvement by turning a presentation into a conversation. This engagement turns audience members into active participants in the communication process instead of passive receivers. Even when only a few respond verbally, the chance of being called on keeps everyone more engaged mentally. Maybe most essential to sustaining engagement is always connecting your material to your audience's lives. Information in isolation, no matter how interesting or well presented, will never engage as deeply as information that's clearly connected to your audience's experiences, goals, or challenges. These connections create personal relevance that naturally commands attention and enhances both understanding and retention. This connection building isn't something you do once in your introduction and then abandon. It should be interwoven with your message with frequent reference back to audience interests and concerns. This is important to you because you may use this when. This solves the problem many of you struggle with when. These clear connections allow audiences to see not only what you're saying, but why it's important to them in particular. Aside from these tactics of grabbing and sustaining attention, creating real connection takes a more human level of interaction. This real connection occurs when you step away from delivering facts to revealing something of yourself, your own outlook, experience, or enthusiasm for what you're speaking about. Displaying your authentic self does not involve making your message all about you or communicating inappropriately personal details. It involves allowing your true personality to shine through instead of playing a pretend professional or presenter identity that puts up barriers. It involves being a human being, displaying passion when you're enthusiastic, concern when you're alarmed, conviction when you're really convinced about something. This kind of authenticity could involve expressing relatable personal anecdotes or insights that shed light on your message. It could be expressing oneself with conviction and passion instead of merely neutral detachment when the subject calls for it. It may be nothing more than speaking in natural language and words, as opposed to stiff formalized sentences that imply artificial space. That naturalness is important because humans tend to bond with other humans, not with rehearsed performance or corporate facades. When you speak an authentic self, you open the door to authentic connection. You are someone your listeners can connect with and trust and not just some information source. Also key to establishing connection is clarifying your why, elucidating not only what you are communicating, but for what reasons. Transparency regarding purpose and motive enables audiences to grasp the values and ends underlying your message, producing richer resonance when those values and ends are also their own. This transparency regarding purpose relates your message to values or objectives that transcend what is being said. It lifts communication out of the context of information to that of meaning and purpose. I'm posting this communication style not only because it works, but because I think that clearer understanding among people is the key to solving our most urgent issues. This type of purpose statement generates a different level of involvement than simply offering techniques in a vacuum. Showing empathy and understanding further enhances connection by illustrating that you truly see and value your audience's point of view. Acknowledging their challenges, concerns, or viewpoints, even when different from your own, creates a sense of being seen and understood that naturally enhances receptivity to your message. This empathetic connection involves explicitly acknowledging the audience's perspective. I know many of you have tried communication techniques before that promised results but didn't deliver. It means showing you understand their specific challenges. The time pressure you face makes implementing new approaches difficult. And in interactive contexts, it takes active listening, which means reacting to what you're hearing instead of just waiting for your next turn to talk. Inclusive language that includes all members of your audience supports this bond by guaranteeing no one is marginalized or excluded by the words you choose. This involves steering clear of words that exclude unnecessarily or stereotype some groups, employing words that recognize diversity, and paying attention to words that may have unintended negative meanings for some in the audience. This is not political correctness, but rather good communication. When individuals perceive themselves to be excluded or marginalized by words, they automatically lose interest in the message. Inclusive language ensures that everyone in your audience can focus on your content rather than being distracted by terms that seem to exclude or diminish them. As your communication moves toward its conclusion, making your message memorable becomes the final engagement challenge. Research on memory consistently shows the primacy and recency effect. Individuals are more likely to recall the beginning and end of a sequence better than the middle. This psychological principle makes your starting and ending that much more essential in making a lasting impression. A powerful conclusion, as we have discovered in Chapter 4, summarizes main points and provides a sense of closure while leaving a lasting memory impression. It could rephrase your main message in strong words, pose a question that takes your thoughts to action, or leave a last word or picture that summarizes your main point. Whatever the method you use, it needs to leave a clear sense of conclusion while reinforcing what you want audiences to recall the most. Throughout your message, strategic repetition and restatement of main points increases memorability. It doesn't involve repeating the same words over and over again in the same phraseology, which very soon becomes monotonous. But more in terms of repeating important points in new phrasing that sets up multiple routes to the same fundamental point. Clarity of structure increases understanding. If your thoughts are in a coherent sequence, your listeners can follow your thinking more readily. Structured thoughts produce structured understanding. These differences support the main idea without making it stale and boring. Summaries and signposts in longer messages play the same reinforcing role, allowing audiences to follow and retain your main points. We've discussed how structure produces clarity. Next, we'll see how it supports memory. These transitional summaries establish several exposure points to your key ideas, greatly increasing retention. Crafting memorable sound bites, succinct, repeatable phrases that capture essential concepts offers mental handles that make your message easier to understand and recall. Structure is the skeleton that provides your message with shape and substance. Conciseness is not saying less, it's avoiding waste. These concise formulatabilities make up memorable summaries of broader concepts that remain in long-term memory and can readily be recalled and retransmitted. These sound bites tend to utilize rhetorical devices such as parallelism, similar grammar, what you say is important, how you say it is even more important, or contrast, juxtaposition of opposites. Plain language does not illustrate plain thinking, it illustrates plain thinking. These patterns generate rhythm and emphasis that naturally increase memorability. Lastly, a definitive call to action turns passive comprehension into possible change by directly indicating what you would like your audience to think, feel, or do because of your communication. This definition of next steps avoids the typical situation where audiences like your message but are not sure how to use or react to it. From today onwards, check every significant email prior to sending to cut out unwanted words. This particular direction establishes a distinct path from knowledge to action. Making this next step easy and obvious to take makes actual implementation more likely. Dividing bigger changes into little steps that are easy to accomplish, offering resources or tools that make action easy, and confronting possible obstacles all serve to convert agreement into action. This hands-on aspect of engagement guarantees that your message not only generates fleeting interest but results in enduring effect. Let's now apply these concepts with exercises aimed at building your skills at generating engagement and bonding. Our first exercise is storytelling, arguably the strongest tool for engagement out there. Consider a personal anecdote related to one of the communication principles, maybe a miscommunication that could have been avoided by more structured communication or a moment when brief communication created a better result. Practice narrating this as a brief interesting anecdote with a definite point. Consider capturing the important storytelling elements, including setting, in which it took place, where and when, characters, who were they, conflict, what issue or adversity arose, and resolution, how it was concluded and what was learned. Leave your account short, 2 or 3 minutes as told aloud, yet having enough specific detail that it remains vibrant and compelling. The objective is not to make elaborate entertainment but to cultivate the skill of framing useful experience in a narrative mode that enlightens your points as well as causes involvement. Read your story aloud and hone it until it rolls smoothly and explicitly links to the principle of communication you wish to demonstrate. The second exercise nurtures your facility with descriptive, specific language. Take some generic, vague sentences such as the presentation worked or the new process is improved. Rewrite each one in concrete detail and sensory language to make it more tangible and interesting. Ask yourself, what exactly did happen that made the presentation work? What did individuals do or say in reaction? What precisely is improved about the new process? How would one see, hear, or feel this improvement? Turn general judgments into concrete descriptions that build vivid mental images. For instance, the presentation was effective could be rewritten as, the presentation engaged everyone's attention for the entire hour, generated 15 questions, and prompted 3 department heads to ask for follow-up meetings to put the ideas into practice. This concrete description builds a much more vivid picture of what effective actually looked like in this situation. Our last exercise establishes your set of attention-getting devices. Select a subject on which you might be speaking within a professional or personal setting. Brainstorm 3 to 5 different ways to start that communication to immediately capture attention using various techniques like questions, statistics, stories, quotes, or surprising statements. For each opening, consider how it would engage your specific audience. What questions would stimulate their curiosity? What statistics would surprise them? What stories would resonate with their experiences? Tailor each attention getter to create immediate relevance and interest for your particular listeners. After generating these options, evaluate which would be most effective for your specific purpose and audience. Different openings create different tones and expectations. A surprising statistic creates a different engagement than a personal story or a provocative question. Choose the approach that best serves your overall communication goals while creating immediate engagement. As you go about using these exercises, keep in mind that engagement is not about tricks and techniques deployed mechanistically. It's about genuine connection that happens when you're communicating with respect for your audience as active participants rather than passive recipients. The most advanced engagement tactics will fail miserably if they're not accompanied by real interest in your audience and sincere belief in your message. The end result is communication that resonates on many levels, that speaks to the mind, touches the heart, connects with values, and moves to action. When you attain this multi-dimensional connection, your words don't merely go into your audience's ears. They go into their thinking, their feeling, and possibly their doing. They don't merely convey information, they generate understanding. They don't merely reach your audience, they move them. This is the real power of eloquent communication, not just to be clear or correct or even convincing, but to establish substance between human beings. When you learn the skill of engagement, you turn communication into a mighty force for knowledge, influence, and positive transformation. In our final chapter, we'll discuss an aspect of communication that turns spotty success into ongoing mastery. Beneath all the principles and practices we've been discussing, there is a factor that decides if your communication skills grow or dwindle with time. This invisible aspect, overlooked in the race for rapid growth, distinguishes those who turn into truly articulate individuals from those who only know how articulation is done. The distinction between knowledge and embodiment depends on this one practice we'll discover in this chapter together. Chapter 9, Practice to Power. Through the pages of this book, we've traveled the whole spectrum of the essential building blocks of clear communication, from the exact mechanisms of speech to the strategic deployment of form, from audience-focused adjustment to concise conveyance, from effective support to sincere involvement. You now have a thorough knowledge of what it takes to make communication clear, effective, and persuasive. You understand the rules, methods, and strategies that set everyday speech apart from real articulate expression. But here's something true that most communication books refuse to say. You won't become a skilled communicator just because you know things. You can grasp every idea in this book with ease. You can identify articulate communication when you hear it. You can even dissect what makes some speakers so effective. But none of this ensures that you yourself will speak articulately when it counts. This disconnect between knowing and doing, between understanding and living, is what distinguishes those who study communication from those who master it. It's the gap between theory and practice, between mental understanding and intuitive ability. What fills this gap? What turns communication knowledge into communication power? What turns principles and methods into intuitive, natural expression that comes from you in even the most difficult situations? The answer is elegantly simple but immensely demanding. It's an ingredient so basic that it gets overlooked in our quest for easy answers and immediate results. It's an ingredient that can't be substituted with any amount of knowledge, talent, or natural aptitude. And it's the one thing that makes the difference between your communication skills improving or plateauing in the long term. This basic ingredient, this link between knowledge and mastery, is intentional, persistent practice. Practice is an obvious solution, even a frustrating one. In a culture that glorifies overnight success and instant change, the notion that mastery involves long-term effort over time can be unpalatable. We're attracted to the allure of communication shortcuts or mystical methods that will magically transform our skills without the expenditure of time and effort. But this view misinterprets the nature of effective communication itself. In essence, articulation is more of a physical rather than intellectual ability, a tricky coordination of muscles in the lips, tongue, jaw, vocal cords and breathing equipment. As with any physical ability, from playing an instrument to being good at a sport, it takes not only to know, but muscle memory built up through repetition and honing. This physical aspect makes practice unavoidable to get better. You can learn about swimming style all day long, but unless you get into the water and propel your body through it again and again, you will not be a swimmer. You can know the principles of articulation perfectly, but until you perform the physical act of speaking with deliberate focus on these principles, you will not internalize them. Repetition establishes the fluency that converts conscious technique to unconscious ability. At first, the application of communications principles takes effort and thought. You have to think consciously about your enunciation, organize your thoughts, adjust to your audience and apply all the other aspects we've touched upon. This conscious application is mentally exhausting and tends to disrupt the natural communication process. With repetition though, these conscious methods become second nature. The brain establishes neural pathways that make articulate expression more automatic. Finally, you no longer need to consciously consider making good sounds or changing the way you sound or organizing your ideas in logical order. You just do it automatically, leaving your conscious mind to concentrate on content and relationship and not technique. This shift from conscious effort toward unconscious competence is what builds the confidence and control that define great articulate communicators. When you learn by experience that you can communicate clearly and well, when you've done it successfully many times before, you enter communication situations with a composed confidence that itself increases your effectiveness. Practice also eliminates one of the most prevalent fallacies in communication development, the "I know it, so I can say it" fallacy. Most individuals take for granted that if they grasp an idea clearly within their own heads, then necessarily they can readily explain it to others as well. This misjudges the great disparity between inner understanding and outer communication. In fact, even specialists in a field many times fail to express their know-how to outsiders clearly. Mental clarity does not necessarily equal expressive clarity. The skill of taking internal comprehension and converting it into external expression that others can readily understand is a separate ability that needs its own cultivation through, you guessed it, practice. Not all practice, however, is created equal. Simple repetition, repeating the same task over and over without reflection or adaptation has little value for building skills. What brings about genuine improvement is deliberate practice, directed effort towards particular dimensions of performance with the explicit intention of improvement. Deliberate practice includes pinpointing specific areas of improvement, having definite goals for each practice session, getting feedback on performance and making deliberate changes based on the same. It's not about spending time, but spending time wisely with purpose and direction. This is a practice that demands going just beyond your comfort zone, practicing on the edge of where you are now, not staying within that safety zone. If you practice only what you're already capable of doing well, you'll have little to gain. Most productive practice comes from the zone where you're being challenged but not overwhelmed, where you have to stretch but can still get it done with some effort. The regularity of this practice is as important as its quality. Short, frequent practice periods provide much better outcomes than sporadic attempts at marathon practice. The brain constructs neural pathways more powerfully by means of distributed practice, frequent exposure and repetition across time, rather than through massed practice or cramming. This principle posits that 3 sets of 15 minutes of intense practice per week would probably produce a better outcome than a single session of 3 hours per month. The consistent reinforcement aids in locking in learning and establishing lasting habits instead of ephemeral improvements which soon evaporate. The most effective method integrates practice into daily communication habits as opposed to seeing it as a distinct activity. Each conversation, meeting, presentation, or phone call is a chance to use and hone your skills. This integration makes practice a normal part of your daily interactions rather than an added burden on your calendar. With this knowledge of why practice is important and how it needs to be done, let's look at how to prepare well for significant communications, the basis on which practice is built. Successful preparation is to go back through the basic principles we discussed in this book. Prior to preparing any major communication, think about the key aspects of articulation, vocal presentation, organization, audience accommodation, supporting evidence, succinctness, and involvement. These principles are a complete checklist that covers everything you need to consider to address all aspects of successful communication. With these guiding principles in mind, planning your message is a precise and deliberate process instead of a random jumble of ideas. Start by identifying your basic purpose. What exactly you want your audience to know, believe, or do as a result of your communication. This purpose is the sieve through which all other content decisions are filtered. Then, sketch out the logical structure that will best accomplish this purpose. Find your key points, the most important ideas that have a direct relationship with your overall message, and organize them in the best possible order for your particular audience and purpose. This organization forms the framework that will hold all of the details, examples, and descriptions you'll fill in. Next, choose the right content and supporting information according to your knowledge of your audience. What illustrations will they connect with their lives? What facts will they be persuaded by? How detailed should they be? This audience-focused choice makes sure that your material not only serves your purpose, but resonates with your audience. In many communications, particularly formal presentations or detailed explanations, having notes or prompts prepared can be useful. These vary from complete scripts, writing down word for word what you will say, to keyword outlines, recording only the key points and major supporting details, to bare minimum prompts, a few cue words to remind you of what to say. The most effective format will depend on your level of experience, the level of formality involved, and your own style. Novices tend to need more notes, whereas proficient communicators can get by with a few simple reminders. Whichever structure you adopt, be aware that notes should be a safety net, not a crutch. They're to augment your natural communication, not substitute for it. Importantly, if you do create notes, rehearse with them in the actual structure you'll use. If you'll be using note cards during your talk, rehearse with note cards. If you are going to practice from a one-page outline, use that to practice. Such consistency means your practice is effectively modeling the true conditions you'll be working with. With message outlined and notes prepared, you can now use your planned message for perhaps the most important part of practice, rehearsal. It's here your prepared communication finds its voice, words on a page or notions in your brain turned into true verbal communication. The one most critical rehearsal principle is this: you need to rehearse out loud. Quiet practice, reading your notes or thinking about what you are going to say is inadequate preparation for spoken communication. The physical act of saying words engages distinct neural pathways than quiet reading or thought. Only by practicing aloud can you build the muscle memory and vocal habits that will help you in the real communication scenario. Speaking out also uncovers dimensions of your message that aren't obvious when proofreading in your head. You'll find your clumsy wording that appeared okay in print but sounded clunky read aloud. You'll spot transitions that require smoothing or clarification of explanations. You'll achieve a realistic feel for timing and flow that silent review just can't give. To gain the fullest advantage of rehearsal, attempt to recreate the actual environment as closely as possible. If you will be standing during your actual presentation, stand when you rehearse. If you'll be using gestures or movement, include these aspects in your rehearsal. If you are going to be using visual aids or props, practice with them so that you have a smooth transition. Whenever possible, practice in a room that is roughly the same as where you will actually be speaking. Acoustics, room size, and configuration can greatly influence how you will need to project your voice and control your delivery. Knowing the physical space eliminates one more factor that otherwise could distract you from clear communication when it counts. One of the strongest tools for good rehearsal is recording yourself, making an objective record enabling you to see your own communication from an outside point of view. Video recording gives the fullest feedback, recording not only your words, but your body language, facial expression, and presence. Audio recording specifically draws attention to voice aspects such as clarity, variety, and filler words. Most individuals avoid recording themselves because of embarrassment with viewing or listening to their own communication. Such embarrassment is understandable, but should be overcome for the precious feedback recording yields. No other kind of feedback gives you as straightforward, unadorned a sense of how you really do present yourself to others as opposed to how you perceive you're presenting yourself. While listening back over recordings, criticize constructively rather than judgmentally. Be searching for concrete aspects to correct and not sweeping generalizations about good or bad. Pay attention to specific strengths on which to capitalize and where you might need to develop. Perfection is not the objective, but development, finding specific areas to improve your effectiveness. When you plan your rehearsal sessions, think about working on various aspects in separate run-throughs instead of attempting to get everything perfect at once. One rehearsal can be dedicated entirely to clear articulation, another to vocal variety, another to seamless transitions between points. This specific focus enables more focused improvement in each area. Be especially mindful of your beginning and end, rehearsing these sections several times. These sections have disproportionate influence on your overall performance and are also the most likely to be disrupted by nervousness during real delivery. Additional practice generates increased confidence and fluency exactly where they count the most. Likewise, provide additional focus to any especially troublesome sections or transitions in your communication. Recognize the sections where you falter, lose your train of thought, or have difficulty explaining clearly. Directed practice on these challenging segments builds confidence that extends through the whole communication. A frequent query is how much practice is sufficient. Though this depends on the priority of the communication and on your level of experience, the rule of thumb is to practice to a point where you are comfortable with the content and don't feel mechanically memorized. The objective is conversational ease. Understanding your material so well that you can present it naturally yet still adjust to the particular circumstance and audience. Understanding this way tremendously increases confidence because studies continually reveal that one of the main causes of communication fear is uncertainty regarding content or presentation. When you are practiced enough to know you can present your thoughts clearly and effectively, most of the fear automatically disappears. You can concentrate on engaging with your audience instead of fretting about what you will say and how you will say it. Although self-directed practice is beneficial, having others provide feedback brings an essential element to your growth. Regardless of how objective you attempt to be, you have blind spots in your view of your own communication. Outside feedback calls out these blind spots and gives you the audience's eye that ultimately makes you effective. Good criticism speeds up the learning process by pointing out very precise areas for improvement that could take you much longer to see on your own. It cuts out the trial and error method, focusing your practice efforts more directly on the pieces that will bring about the most change. Where this feedback is coming from makes a big difference. Ideally, ask for input from individuals who will be kind but blunt. Those who desire you to do better and will be truthful without excessive cruelty. They may be trusted colleagues, bosses, mentors, or communication experts based on your particular circumstance and needs. Whenever possible, seek feedback from various opinions instead of relying on one source. Various listeners pick up on various things in your communication and react to various things depending on their own background, preferences, and experience. This diversity of views gives you a fuller picture of your strengths and areas for development. How you request feedback has a significant impact on what you get. Cryptic requests such as, "What did you think?" or "How did I do?" usually elicit cryptic, frequently useless feedback. Instead, request specific information about specific dimensions of your communication. Was my main point clear? Did I use too many filler words? Did the introduction grab your attention? Were there sections where you got confused or lost interest? Open-ended questions tend to get more useful information than yes-no questions. What was the most memorable section of my presentation tells us more than was my presentation memorable. Likewise, where you became confused or lost interest is more useful feedback than was anything unclear. Getting feedback well is just as important as asking for it. Listen openly without getting defensive, even if the feedback disconfirms your own views or points out flaws you'd rather not see. Keep in mind that improvement is the aim, not validation. And that even painful feedback can be extremely helpful for growth. If feedback is vague or appears to be of no use, ask questions for clarification to hear more specifically what the individual noticed and what they recommend. When you comment that the middle portion dragged, what part of the middle felt slow to you? What exactly about my vocal reading sounded monotonous? Such follow-up questions turn subjective impressions into objective facts you can respond to. Thank people for their time and suggestions always, even if you disagree with their criticism. Showing gratitude fosters ongoing feedback and rapport with those who are willing to assist you in improving. It also shows respect for their opinion even if you decide not to follow all of their advice. After receiving feedback, objectively review it before making a decision about what to do. Not all feedback is of equal value or applicable to your objectives. Think about the source's experience, consistency of feedback across several sources, and alignment with your own communication priorities. Use feedback as constructive input to your development process instead of as instructions you have to follow blindly. In addition to specific practice for specific communications, articulate expression involves a more general commitment to ongoing improvement, turning communication development into a lifelong process instead of a short-term effort. This sustained growth starts with intentional attention to your daily communication patterns. Listen to how you talk in ordinary conversations, meetings, and phone calls. Observe tendencies in your speech, word selection, organization, and engagement. Get attuned to habitual words, filler words, or ambiguous words that have become second nature to your conversation. Awareness is the first step to conscious change. Consciously use the guidelines we've discussed throughout this book in these mundane interactions. Practice articulate speech when conversing with colleagues. Try concise expression in habitual emails. Try out various engagement strategies in meetings with your team. These day-to-day interactions give you innumerable chances to hone your skills in low-pressure contexts. Use each interaction as a chance to practice instead of holding your attention to communication for special occasions. This does not just give more uniform development, but it also makes articulate expression become second nature to you instead of something you prepare specially for special events. Complement this mindful practice with ongoing learning and observation. Listen critically to articulate speakers, analyzing specifically what makes them effective. What vocal patterns do they use? How do they structure their ideas? How do they engage their audience? This analysis provides models you can adapt to your own style and situation. Read about communication and related topics to expand your understanding and discover new approaches. Watch presentations by skilled communicators focusing on different elements each time. Structure in one viewing, vocal delivery in another, engagement techniques in a third. This targeted observation develops your ability to recognize and implement effective communication strategies. Seek opportunities for public speaking or presentations that stretch your abilities in new directions. Volunteer for speaking roles in professional or community organizations. Offer to lead discussions or training sessions at work. These experiences provide valuable practice in varied contexts with different audiences and purposes. Throughout this ongoing development, embrace the journey rather than fixating solely on the destination. Recognize that mastery takes time and consistent effort. There are no shortcuts to becoming a truly articulate communicator. The best communicators are those who have dedicated themselves to ongoing improvement over the course of years, not those who have attempted instant change. Commend small improvements along the way instead of being dismayed by the distance between your current skills and your final destination. Pay attention to when you articulate an idea more clearly than you would have 6 months prior. Notice when you exhibit better vocal variety than you once did. Identify when you reach your audience more successfully than before. These small gains build upon each other over time into dramatic improvement. Stay encouraged by keeping in mind the power your words have to shape, connect, and make a positive impact. Articulate communication isn't a vocational ability or personal achievement. It's a tool that can change understanding, mend disputes, motivate action, and forge deep connections. This higher purpose gives enduring motivation when improvement is a difficult process. Finally, let's apply these principles with these final steps of application that will initiate your continued development as a clear communicator. To start, set up a regular rehearsal schedule. Schedule time exclusively devoted to the rehearsal of communication skills. This could be 15 minutes, 3 times a week, spent on articulation drills, practicing vocal variety, or rehearsal for future communications. The exact timing is less important than the regularity of your commitment. Approach these practice sessions as absolute appointments with yourself, no less significant than with other people. Schedule the time on your calendar, place reminders, and keep these commitments in place even when other obligations come up. This disciplined behavior communicates to yourself and others that you highly regard communication development as a fundamental priority, not an optional add-on when time allows. Second, institutionalize your feedback process by making it a conscious part of your development process. Following your next serious communication, if a formal speech, a special meeting, or a tough discussion, find a single or dual trusted person or persons and, specifically, solicit their feedback upon 1 or 2 elements of communication. Plan specific questions in advance instead of putting people on the spot. I'm trying to be more precise. Were you aware of parts where I seemed less direct and removed too many details? I'm trying for more concise structures. Was my structure coherent and straightforward? These specific questions provide more helpful feedback than open-ended ones regarding how you performed. Last, pledge yourself to ongoing learning by committing to one concrete thing you'll do this month to improve your communication skills. It could be sitting through a speech by a competent speaker with rapt attention to their methods. It could be reading a blog post about some particular area of communication. It might be rehearsing tongue twisters daily to enhance articulation or deliberately removing filler words for a week. Commit to a particular, realistic goal instead of leaving it broad or daunting. I will rehearse vocal variety for 10 minutes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday stands a greater chance of being carried out than I will enhance my vocal delivery. Write it down and put it where you'll see it consistently as a reminder of your priority for development. As we close out this examination of effective communication, I want to leave you with a view that goes beyond techniques and strategies. A vision of what your commitment to communication development can eventually build in your life and in the lives of those you touch. Words really are power. They can clarify or confuse, connect or divide, inspire or discourage, heal or harm. The skill to use words with precision, purpose, and effect is not just a professional benefit or social competence. It's a deep ability to influence reality through the meaning you create and share. When you commit to building this capacity, when you practice regularly, ask for feedback boldly, and strive for continuous improvement thoughtfully, you're not merely a more effective speaker or writer. You're becoming someone who can turn understanding into action, settle conflicts that appeared insoluble, bridge divides between differences, and motivate action toward common goals. You're growing into a person who can communicate visions that no one else saw, explain things that no one else understood, and put feelings into words that no one else could. You're growing into a person who can soothe with the exact right words, provoke with the exact right questions, and understand with the exact right stories. This path from knowing to being, from grasping principles to embodying them naturally in all interaction is the real transformation this book has asked you to embark on. It's not a journey with a destination, but a constant evolution toward increasingly articulate, effective, and genuine expression. The principles and practices we've covered aren't technical procedures to apply robotically, but seeds to nurture through persistent care and attention. As you tend to these seeds through focused practice, they flower into capacities that are second nature, simply parts of who you are as a person and as a communicator. And it's this incorporation, this integration into your very being of articulate expression that is the greatest power that practice forges. It's the distinction between possessing communication skills and being a skilled communicator through and through. It's the distinction between speaking well some of the time and speaking clearly, with impact and authentic connection all of the time. This is within everyone's grasp if they are willing to take the journey, practice regularly, accept criticism openly and strive to improve on an ongoing basis. It takes no natural genius or special talent, only exceptional commitment to the development process itself over time. As you proceed from these pages into your own practice, never forget that every word you say has the power to make meaning, connection, and positive difference. Each conversation, presentation, or written communication offers the chance not merely to deliver information, but to reshape understanding. Each encounter is an opportunity to wield your words with intention, accuracy, and strength. The path to speak communication is really a path to more meaningful connection with others and more genuine expression of yourself. It's a trip worthwhile, not merely for the business benefits it builds or the confidence it generates at the personal level, but because of the empowering difference your words can make to a world desperate for plain meaning, authentic connection, and mobilized action. Your voice is important. Your words are important, and with intentional, repetitive practice, the ability of those words to create positive change will increase over your lifetime. That is the real promise of effective communication. Not merely to be heard, but to be listened to. Not merely to talk, but to relate. Not merely to communicate, but to change. Articulation is not enough, however, when you are ambushed. Even the most effective communicators stall when asked to speak quickly during meetings, interviews, or out-of-the-blue conversations. What do you do in those very moments when you have no time to prepare? There's a missing link that divides people who are able to always deliver brilliant ideas under pressure from those who only know what to say when the moment has passed. The answer to this difficulty, the means to making absolutely responsive agile conversation, lies for you in the audiobook, Speak Like a Genius, How to Think Fast Before You Speak.